Raylan Brandel,
Present.
Lori Casey,
Here.
Dan Dennehy, Mary McCormick, Cindy Perdue-Dolan, Cindy Shaw,
Here.
Chad Silk,
Here.
Matt Steppen, Van Thielen.
All right. First up, public comment on any item on the agenda. And second, public comment on anything on the not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the study commission. All right, we'll move to approval of minutes for the meeting held 2nd of June, 2025. Kim?
I'd just like to note, I don't know if you all got my text, but take page 7 off and replace it with pages 7, 8, 9 that I have handed out to you, because I forgot an entire 2 pages of dialogue, or handwritten pages of dialogue.
All right. Any other comments? Ms. McCormick?
Yeah, I just would like some clarification added to item 10A under new business. It was something that I asked for is correspondence from the public be read into the minutes. And that was one part of it, but it was also that be done in the public comment sections, and that is not mentioned in there. It's alternative of
I had you both saying either in the public comment or where appropriate.
you don't. It doesn't say that. It doesn't.
No, I mean, that's why I didn't put in the minutes, because it was, because we already have a spot for it under correspondence.
I was making an appeal that
Okay.
any new emails coming in from the public
right.
be read into the minutes,
Into the minutes.
under one of the public comment sections. That's
Okay.
what I asked for.
Okay, I'll make that change, but let's specify tonight then which public comment section.
Well, it depends on the correspondence.
Okay,
If they're commenting, I mean, you'll have to read them, and if they're commenting on something that's on the agenda, then it would be on the agenda. If it's something in general, I think it would be under public comments on anything not on agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the study commission. But they're public comments, and they should be treated.
okay, that was not.
I listened to what I said again, and I was very clear in what I said.
Ms. Cohn, there was another comment from Ed Banderob to this effect as well, just talking about an email saying, I'm trying to find the email, sorry, saying that we should at least, as a point of order, say that we have received the communication and it is just to note and place on file if there's no action that we'd be taking on that communication.
Yeah, I think we've kind of done that, because all the communications we have said, we've noted that we've gotten it and it's on file.
So maybe that's just one of those taglines that can be right in your notes. Mr. Steppen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just looking at the minutes, at the top it shows May 19th, 2025. I think these are the, oh, did she? Okay, all right. I might have printed before the change then. Thank you.
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, also I think in Ed's email, he's asking for some headphones or something for his hearing, because his hearing is not very good, and he left halfway through the meeting last week because he couldn't hear it. So if we could ask IT to accommodate him with that, that'd be fantastic.
Part of the problem is the acoustics in this room are so bad, I can't even hear.
Okay.
Which is why I look at you guys, because I kind of
Right.
read lips.
Well,
Yeah.
all I'm saying is that
I'll talk to IT and see
Yeah,
if they have
please.
any accommodation for that.
Yeah, and he needs to have that
Yeah.
accommodation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see there's an item 11 on the agenda with a blank, and I mean, it's just, I'm sure, okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything missing, because somebody else might look at this and wonder what it was. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the minutes? Can I have a motion to approve, please?
Approve as amended.
Motion to approve.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay, thank you. A motion to approve as amended, Mr. Thielen, correct? Okay. And a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you for approving our minutes. Thank you for the updates and the amendments. Okay, so moving on to our conversations with departments, we have Mr. Zach Osborne, our Butte-Silver Fire Department Chief, and other titles. I'm sorry, I'm going to mess it up. Director of Fire Services with us tonight. I want to remind us of our goal. We know that the fire department questions have been rather passionate within our community between volunteers and our paid departments. And so our goal tonight is really to look at the structure and function of our charter and what might need to be in that charter if there's any revisions. We, of course, have the questions that we have asked all of our Butte-Silver Bow employees and elected officials to answer, and Mr. Osborne has provided us, what did you call it, the dissertation? So we will have that to go through. So thank you for providing that background to us. As we go through, I want our commission to please keep that charter in mind as we walk through these questions. And with our follow-ups, let's try to stay on topic related to what would best serve our municipality and the people that we are here to represent. And furthermore, I think there's some things that we can ask, should we make changes? Do you have recommendations for changes? And I think you have given us some of that in here. So just to lay the table for us as we begin. And so we'll start tonight. I'll start with Ms. Casey with our questions, if we could. And then, Mr. Osborne, you can feel free to take us in the direction that makes sense to some of the questions you'll start, and then we'll have 20 minutes talking from you, and then we'll do our follow-ups as well.
Can I, Madam Chair, Commissioners, can I do a intro prior to the questions, just so that we have a little bit of an idea of past government of the Butte-Silver Fire Department? Do you guys mind if I do that before we get into questions?
I think that would be appropriate, and I believe this body asked for that of you, to bring forward some history so we could understand what has come before today. Is there any opposition to us changing direction? Okay, so please, you
Okay.
continue.
I'm not sure if I treat this like a council meeting, but obviously, for the record, I'm Zach Osborne, Director of Fire Services, and thank you all for having me tonight. I'm going to apologize prior. I have quite a few pages here of intro that I'm just going to read. You guys can follow along with me. As I handed out those books, those are your guys's for reference to whatever I say. So I apologize for how long this might be, and here we go. To begin this meeting, I have prepared a brief history of our unique government structure and how we got where we are today, and this will give you a little bit of insight into the elephant in the room, which is House Bill 547. The history of 547 begins long before the bill itself. It starts in 1887, the year the Montana Territorial Supreme Court declared that municipalities had no inherent right to self-government. As noted in the Montana Municipal Officials Handbook, Chapter 1.4.4, As early as 1887, the Supreme Court of the Montana Territory held that municipal corporations had no inherent right of local self-government. This was upheld in Montana's 1889 Constitution, where local governments had to operate under no inherent rights. We know this today as Dillon's Rule. While constitutional amendments in 1922 allowed for consolidated local governments, they still operated without any independent authority. In that framework, the state had to pass laws to regulate nearly every function of local government, including fire departments. That changed in 1972 when Montana adopted a new constitution that fundamentally redefined local government power. Two provisions in particular reshaped the local control landscape. Article 11, Section 5.1, the legislature shall provide procedures permitting a local government unit or combination of units to frame, adopt, amend, and abandon a self-government charter with the approval of a majority of those voting on the question. And Article 11, Section 5.3, charter provisions establishing executive, legislative, and administrative structure and organization are superior to statutory provisions. And to remove any doubt, the legislature reinforced this principle through statute in 1975. The powers and authority of local government unit with self-government powers shall be liberally constructed. Every reasonable doubt as to the existence of government power or authority shall be resolved in favor of the existence of that power or authority. In 1977, after 3 failed attempts to consolidate, 1924, 31, and 63, the people of Butte-Silver chose to exercise the constitutional provision allowing for consolidated government and adopting a self-government charter, the constitutional provision of home rule. This made Butte-Silver the first local government in Montana to consolidate, and with that, to also confront the structural challenges that consolidation brings, with fire protection being one of the most complex, as we all still see is unresolved. Montana law provides for multiple forms of fire protection services, from municipal to rural, to fire service areas, and depending on the area they are located, they use volunteer and paid firefighters. At the time of consolidation, the city of Butte and the county of Silver Bow were facing some hard questions regarding its fire services, in particular, our volunteer departments. You see, in 1974, State Fire Marshal William Penetella requested an opinion from the Montana Attorney General regarding whether first-class cities, which would include Butte, could legally supplement their paid fire department with volunteer firefighters. Attorney General Robert Woodall issued an opinion stating, and I quote, "A first-class city which has a paid fire department may not supplement that department with volunteer firemen," end quote. This Attorney General opinion had real implications for Butte and the volunteer departments within our first-class city boundaries. Fortunately for the volunteers, the city and the county were in talks about consolidation. With consolidation, Butte-Silver would receive a new classification. We would be redefined a unified city-county government, meaning the volunteer fire departments would be able to remain in the city boundaries through this consolidation as long as it's specified in our home rule charter, which eventually, under Article 7, Section 7.03a, it states, "There shall be a fire department which shall be composed of the paid fire department and volunteer fire departments in the city-county." This language is clear in both construction and intent. The charter mandates the existence of a single fire department made up of both paid and volunteer components. The use of the singular term, "a fire department," confirms that volunteer fire departments within Butte-Silver are divisions within the consolidated fire department, They are not separate or anomalies, entities. And now, with the charter using the home rule provision, we were able to preserve our fire department not being tied down to the Dillon rule structure. However, not everybody at the time agreed with this, and in 1979, just 2 years after consolidation, a representative from Butte introduced House Bill 392. In the meeting minutes for this hearing, we were able to find a letter by a local volunteer firefighter who also served as the secretary-treasurer of the Montana State Volunteer Firemen's Association. That letter stated the intent was to clarify legal uncertainties arising from recent city-county consolidations. The final bill, drawing on language written before home rule provisions, said, and I quote, "The adoption of a city-county consolidated local government has no effect on the existence of a volunteer fire department, a volunteer fire company, or a fire district." However, new language was added in that 1979 bill that says, "unless otherwise specifically provided by charter." That newly added line was in direct contradiction to our charter, which explicitly said that except as otherwise provided by this charter or until changed by ordinance, the organization of existing volunteer fire departments within the city county shall be governed by applicable sections of state law. This language added in House Bill 392 removes any mention of governance by ordinance, narrowing control solely to what is specifically provided by charter. And in doing so, House Bill 392 effectively bypassed the ordinance-based authority that voters had approved in the charter and imposed a new legal threshold. If the charter doesn't spell it out specifically, state law applies by default. By passing House Bill 392 in 1979, the Montana legislature created an enduring statutory contradiction with Butte-Silver's governance framework. Ordinances are not just required by our charter, but are needed. A charter must be broad, and since it can only be changed every 10 years by a vote, we need ordinance to be able to act with current needs and make decisions regarding administrative structure. One example of this structure is department oversight. Butte-Silver Charter, Article 7. The paid fire chief shall be the director of fire services and shall be responsible for the administrative coordination and combination of the paid and volunteer fire departments. And then the structure is further clarified in Butte-Silver Ordinance, which states, the director of fire services shall have entire command and control over all persons connected with the fire department. The director of fire services shall possess full power and authority over the organization, government, and discipline of the paid and volunteer fire departments, and may from time to time establish such rules and regulations subject to the approval of the chief executive. However, with the passing of House Bill 392, some feel the specific ordinance of oversight doesn't apply, since it's an ordinance and not specifically in charter. On this point, and using the language in House Bill 392, a Montana Attorney General's opinion from 1987 interpreted this new statute to mean that volunteer fire departments retained legal and budgetary independence within consolidated governments. Again, this opinion makes sense since it includes very specifically the word budget. If a rural fire district has its own mill levy and supported independently with no connection to the local government, with its own facilities, equipment, and insurance, completely self-sufficient, then yes, House Bill 392 and the Attorney General opinion makes sense. But that's just not the case in Butte-Silver. We are a charter government. We support our volunteer fire departments with city-county buildings, equipment, tax-funded support, and liability coverage. These departments are not separate. They are part of our structure. That's exactly what the charter says, and exactly what the Montana Constitution allows us to do. Up to this point, we have focused primarily on House Bill 392 and the statutory changes now coded in the Montana Code annotated. However, it is important to note that the charter itself does not point us to the statute, or any statute in particular. It simply states that the volunteer fire departments shall be governed by applicable sections of state law. Another applicable section of state law that must be considered is the Montana Occupational Safety and Health Act, found in MCA. This act sets minimum safety and health standards for workplaces, including those involving volunteer firefighters. These definitions establish a direct link, legal link, if Butte-Silver is the employer for workers' compensation purposes. Then it is also the employer for occupational safety and health oversight, injury claims, insurance premiums, and overall safety performance. You would expect this to translate into clear operational safety and risk control. But some volunteer fire departments continue to assert independence, relying on an interpretation of state statutes that allows them to manage their own safety standards and training programs. It would be unreasonable to presume that a volunteer firefighter has the independent authority to develop, implement, and certify training programs on behalf of the city-county department. Butte-Silver funds and administers the workers' compensation policy, owns and insures the equipment and vehicles, and maintains the buildings where these operations take place. Accordingly, Butte-Silver also holds the liability and regulatory accountability for those activities. This is clear under OSHA regulations as adopted by Montana Administrative Rule. The responsibility for safety training and program implementation lies with the employer. In this case, the employer is Butte-Silver. As you can see, there is a multitude of confusion, which all leads to a very unsafe environment for both our employees and our volunteers. It also has penetrated outside of our internal dealings. These contradictions between state, charter, and ordinance have played out publicly on news interviews, social media posts, picketing in front of laborers' union hall, and even in council meetings, like the one this past December regarding fire advisory committee meetings. The Butte-Silver Charter requires a fire advisory committee, and during that council meeting, members of the volunteer fire community, as well as a council commissioner, passionately and aggressively at times called out city-county for not following the charter and holding these advisory meetings more frequently. Yet just a few lines earlier in that same section of the charter, it states that all fire departments, including volunteers, report to the fire director of fire services. However, that part was ignored during the meeting. At the meeting, I was instructed to address these long-standing issues facing our volunteer fire departments. But resolving these problems is not merely a matter of management, it is a matter of law. As the Director of Fire Services, I hold no legislative authority. I can only operate strictly within the bounds of the Charter, municipal code, and applicable state and federal statutes. Acting within my scope of duties, I was able to identify that the core of the issues stemmed from the legal contradiction introduced by House Bill 392 in 1979. And as such, I took appropriate and necessary action to address that problem at its source, the Montana State Legislature. This action was House Bill 547, a step to resolve the long-standing issue and restore safety and oversight. House Bill 547 was simply correction. It would remove the contradictory language introduced by House Bill 392 and would go back to our charter and our ordinance system as intended and voted on by the people of Butte-Silver. This was not a reach of power, but a return to power for our people. House Bill 547 sought to restore the clear authority originally established under the Butte-Silver Charter before the intervention of 392. At its core, House Bill 547 was a safety bill. It aimed to ensure consistency, accountability, and compliance across all divisions of the fire department, ultimately protecting both paid and volunteer firefighters. From a risk management standpoint, this clarification was necessary and overdue. And I thought, well, the volunteer firemen brought this issue to the legislature as stated in 1979, hearing meeting minutes, instead of using local provision. So then why can't we fix this issue the same way? The Montana legislative had no problem inserting itself into the local governance issue in 1979 that affected only Butte-Silver. It should have no problem fixing the confusion, liability risk, and contradictions it has caused. The Montana legislature did recognize the importance by passing the House, the Senate, and the House again. The importance of 547 was also made clear during public testimony on March 26, 2025, before the Senate Local Government Committee. House Bill 547 was a safety-focused bill. Those who testified in support included Butte-Silver's Chief Executive, Director of Fire Services, Safety and Health Coordinator, Montana League of Cities and Towns, International Association of Firefighters, Local 96, Montana Firefighters Association, as well as numerous career firefighters from Butte-Silver also shared their perspective. Throughout the hearing, safety concerns were consistently raised at the central issue. One career firefighter described the personal risk he faced while serving as a volunteer, highlighting the urgent need for clear oversight. Throughout the process of House Bill 547, and even after it was vetoed by the governor, it was referred to as a power bill, and that was never the intent. It was not a get rid of the volunteer fire departments bill. It was a risk management bill, a liability bill, a language cleanup bill, a safety bill. Some have questioned my character and my leadership with House Bill 547. So let me say this now on the record. I have spent years listening to my firefighters bring legitimate safety concerns regarding these issues. I have witnessed unsafe behavior and near misses. I have been told to act, but also at the same time having my hands tied. My responsibility is to the residents of Butte-Silver and to our firefighters, and I will pursue whatever action, take any steps, try and pass as many bills as possible to ensure that each one of our firefighters return home to their families at the end of their shift. That is my duty. That is why I became the chief, to lead them and protect them. They look at me, and I can't in good conscience let another day pass knowing what I know and doing nothing. Our firefighters are out there protecting our community, and I have given my promise that I will do everything in my power to protect them. So now what? As you know, despite bipartisan support, House Bill 547 was vetoed by the governor. The legal contradictions it aimed to resolve still remain. We are being asked to absorb 100% of the liability with 0% of control. The confusion House Bill 392 introduced has left volunteer fire departments operating with uncertain legal status, invoking autonomy while relying entirely on Butte-Silver for insurance, facilities, equipment, and workers' compensation. With the governor's veto, responsibility now shifts to Butte-Silver to act. And now, without this clarification, some volunteers are insisting they are governed only by the Rural Fire District Law in Title VII, Chapter 33, Part 21. If those laws apply as written, then Butte-Silver has no authority, financial or operational, over these departments. That would mean we would be required to stop funding, stop supporting, stop insuring these volunteer fire departments. That's why they wouldn't support House Bill 547. They were afraid of losing autonomy. Well, if that's what they want. After all, the law states, the adoption of a consolidated county municipal government shall have no effect on the existence, rights, or duties of any voluntary fire department. And voluntary fire departments may only be organized, created, supported, financed, dissolved, and managed pursuant to the provisions of Parts 21 and 23 of Chapter 33. In other words, if these departments want to follow those rural district laws, they must become truly independent, organizing and funding themselves entirely under rural fire district statutes. But we don't want that. We appreciate our volunteers. We just ask that if they are going to be a department within Butte-Silver and continue to accept city-county resources, insurance, and operational support, then they can't at the same time claim independence and autonomy. That's the word that we keep hearing throughout this debate. It's been on the news, and that's autonomy. That's what the 9 volunteer departments say they want. And to be fair, the law as it stands does seem to give them that. The adoption of a consolidated county municipal government shall have no effect on the existence, rights, or duties of any volunteer fire department. But we cannot stop reading there, because the same law also says these departments may only be organized, created, supported, financed, dissolved, and managed under the Rural Fire District Statutes, parts 21, 23 of chapter 33. And may only does not mean optional. It means exclusive. If these departments want to operate under those laws, if they are claiming the protections of that of autonomy, then they must accept the responsibilities. They must organize, fund, insure, and manage themselves entirely independent of the county, city-county system. No facilities, no equipment, no insurance, no tax funding from our district, no shared liability, and they must comply with all other laws regarding where and how volunteer fire departments are allowed to operate within a municipality fire district. We now need to have an honest conversation about the future of our volunteer departments. We need to put an end to almost 50 years of legal ambiguity and risk exposure by confirming that if a department functions as part of the city-county, it must also operate with accountability to that city-county. That's not a radical idea. That's not control or power. That's basic governance. So now we choose it. If the volunteer departments want to be self-governing, they also must be self-sustaining. If they want to remain part of Butte-Silver Fire Department under our charter with access to our buildings, insurance, and equipment, they must also follow public policy, operate under one clear chain of command, and meet the same safety and training standards we expect from every other department. They don't get it both ways. We've spent years talking in circles. We've blamed elected officials and career firefighters. We ignored the charter. We've avoided the hard decisions. The bill failed. The risk did not. This is a moment for clarity, for accountability, for action, and for Butte-Silver to finally decide what kind of fire department do we want and what type of community do we want to be. So here I am communicating and open for discussion. But what's not open for debate tonight is safety. The days of bureaucracy and red tape coming at the price of safety is over. It's a non-negotiable. Thank you. The next couple pages, the first one that says 162 at the top, that is the Attorney General's opinion from 1974 from Robert Goodall. That's 3 pages. Then you'll get to the Attorney General Mike Greeley's opinion in 1987. That's the one that just states that they are legally able to exist. They just have to support their own funding. And the next page is just House Bill 547, what it did and what was removed. So, okay, now I'm ready for your questions.
Commissioners, I think in the interest of keeping the conversation germane, we can start with follow-ups with what Mr. Osborne just gave us, and then move into our questions. Is there any disagreement with that or any other challenge? Okay. Mr. Osborne, let me start off by saying thank you for providing the background regarding how charters function within the Montana Code Annotated. I think that will help all of our viewers on YouTube, because it's been one of the questions that we've been talking about with our constituency, so that they understand what a charter is and what self-governing powers are as compared to the other forms of government. So we definitely don't intend to change and unconsolidate, and we definitely don't intend to give up our self-governing powers. So we'll start with that baseline, and thank you for providing that in your narrative. Follow-ups, Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, Zach, if a volunteer fire department is hurt providing fire services in this community, is workman's comp available to that volunteer fire person, that firefighter? Is he covered under workman's comp?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yes, Butte-Silver holds 100% of the liability with all firefighters in Butte-Silver, paid and volunteer.
Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, thank you. Zach, so with that, just to clarify, in my mind, we own all the volunteer equipment, is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I don't know of a lot of equipment that still exists today in our departments that is pre-1977. So 1977, we consolidated, and since then, equipment has been bought by city, county taxpayer dollars, yes.
So that's a yes, that's our equipment. Butte-Silver owns all that equipment, correct?
Correct.
And so, all right, thank you.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, could you tell me how the volunteers, how it's determined who reports to what fire? And if they went independently, that they want to, how would that change or stay the same?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I'll have to go back a lot of years. It used to be a rule of a rural district that you must live either in that district boundaries or be close to that department. So how a volunteer would respond years ago is, as you guys probably can remember, they would walk across the street and go to the station and jump in the truck and respond to the call. Now they kind of get the freedom to pick and choose their own department. So a lot of the individuals, the personnel, they might live, they might live in Walkerville and be a volunteer to Terra Verde Fire Department, way south. So how they respond to fires, they have their legal districts, some that were voted on by the people in the 40s, 20s, I don't know. But obviously everything inside that district, if it is a fire, structure fire, a grass fire, they are built in to our response plan. But not only that district, we very strategically build a response plan according to what type of apparatus that volunteer department has. So they have what we call them as response areas, not their districts. They go bigger than their district. You know, for example, Boulevard goes all the way out to Rocker, and Big Butte goes all the way out to Rocker, and Home Atherton might go, you know, all the way to to Terra Verde, depending on what the call is, because some might have a wildland vehicle, some might have a water tender, some might have a pumper truck, some might have a pumper truck and a tender combined. So very strategically, we make a response plan so that all volunteers can respond to the needed call. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, thank you. Zach, this is kind of in response, you know, it pertains more to you. So I think it was like 1996, they took the Director of Fire Services and made the Chief the Director of Fire Services at that time. So what role do you have? Are you the Chief? Are you the Director? Or are you both? That I need to know.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I do get into that a little bit in my first question, but I can touch on it. Yet, July 1st, 1996, in an ordinance that I will state later. But yeah, so it says the fire chief is now to become the Director of Fire Services. So I am labeled in everything on my pay stub and everything as the Director of Fire Services. I go to all of the director meetings within Butte-Silver. Within the career department, I have always been labeled the chief. They don't call me Zach. They don't call me Mr. Osborne. They call me Chief. So I do everything the chief does that a chief would do in a normal fire department. Why they changed the name to the Director of Fire Services, I would assume it's because we had all the volunteer chiefs, and not sure if they wanted to make him have a separate title.
Follow-up. So it's my knowledge, prior to 96, they had a director of fire services, and the paid chief and the volunteer chief would both, with their concerns, go see the director, and the director would then make a decision. So I guess my question is, do you find it better the way it is now, or would it be better like it was then?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, they never had a Director of Fire Services prior. They had a fire coordinator position. Actually, the last one was J.R. Richardson. J.R. Richardson was, at the time that he was the fire coordinator, he was the chief of staff for Chief Executive Peoples. And when Chief Executive Lynch took office in 1990, they got rid of that position. I believe they even maybe looked into it quite a bit and asked JR. JR told me when I asked him a lot of questions, and he said it absolutely did not work. So we had a fire coordinator position, we had a fire chief, we had multiple assistant chiefs, and then obviously we have all of the volunteer chiefs. Would that work today? Was that your question? If it didn't work in 1988 and 89, I can't tell you for certainty if it would work again today. I don't really know. I'd be lying if I told you I would welcome some assistance any way that I could. In that position, I'm not really sure. We recently had a comprehensive fire study done by a company, ESCI, that just gave us our findings a few months ago, and they did recommend something similar, just a person in the middle that could help with communication. Yep. They too kind of didn't know if it would work or not, but you know, what we've been doing for the last 50 years really hasn't worked. So I would love to tell you if I had all the perfect answers and if something would work and something wouldn't work, but I'm not positive. Not positive. Yep.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple questions. One is, 50 years of safety issues. I guess my first question after your analysis here that you read through, why weren't the volunteer departments, all 9 of them, even a representative from each of the 9, involved in the creation of the legislation? I think that's where the initial gut punch was for a lot of these folks that are here in Butte and care about safety. And if it's a safety bill, why was that constructed without any volunteer input whatsoever? That I can't get, I really have a problem with that aspect of it, and I'd like you to explain that to us tonight. Thanks.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, here's my best answer, and I've answered it quite a few times. I think Commissioner Healy asked me at one commissioner meeting a couple different times. We've sat at the table for 50 years, close to 50 years, 46 years, talking about how we can come together, how we can be more safe, how we can train together. All these different conversations, I think, that a lot of people forgot about. House Bill 547 was not, it just wasn't a thing years ago, or a year ago. It wasn't a thought in anybody's mind. I said it in the commissioner meeting. I didn't come up with it. I supported it. I did not come up with it. I can't take credit for 547, even though I was in support of it. We have 2 firefighters that work at the Career to Fire Department, Derek Harvey and Mark Lee. Mark Lee's been on the Butte Fire Department for 29 years. The best way I can answer is he had enough. Derek Harvey and Mark Lee had enough of not being safe. They took it upon themselves to write the bill, asked me if I would support it if they wrote it. I said absolutely. Did not know if the bill was going to come to fruition. So, not knowing that the bill was going to happen, the volunteers were not reached out to. Even though safety concerns and discussions were discussed at multiple fire advisory meetings, multiple fires of the incident command talking to the volunteers talking to the career fire department, some of the volunteers wanting to train with the paid department, some of the volunteers refusing to train with the paid fire department. It's just been 46 years of talking, and somebody finally took action to it, and that's the best answer I can give you. I didn't come up with it. I don't have a better answer than I supported what they came up with.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess where my stumbling block is, Chief Osborne, is the fact that once you initially found out as Chief of Fire Services for Butte-Silver, the minute you found out that Derek Harvey and Mark Lee, our representatives up in Helena, were going to begin crafting this bill, you didn't think to say to them, hey, you're asking for my support as a paid, as head of the fire services and working with the paid, are you going to include the volunteers right at the get-go? You might not have crafted the bill, I understand that, but when they even reached out to say, could you support this, why wasn't your first reaction to say, are we all going to be included?
If I could, I'd like to keep us on charter. I appreciate the question, and I'll let Mr. Osborne answer, but I would like to keep us on structure and function and not litigate the actions of people that were working towards, moving with the House bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The reason I'm asking these questions is because we have allowed Chief Osborne to make a dissertation here of this, and it's not just factual, there are opinions in here. And so I think he needs to clarify and ask and answer questions about those opinions that are in the preamble to the questions.
I agree with
relevant.
getting into opinions. I just don't want to litigate his
No, absolutely
actions.
not. I agree.
Yeah, and then we will hear from volunteers next week that are coming too, so we can hear all the sides of the story. But if you would like to go ahead and address Ms. Dolan's question, and then we'll move forward if we could.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, when I first heard about the making of the bill, it was a thought. Reached out to Chief Executive and the County Attorney to see exactly what they thought, and if they were not going to support it, then we weren't going to pursue it. I was waiting for what they were going to do. And as soon as they told me, and I don't know what you want me to say. You can check emails. You can check the timeline of the dates. Nobody seems to believe because people are hung up on the process rather than the language of the bill. But timing was off. Timing was just off. By the time I got an answer from the Chief Executive and the county attorney, the bill was going in the next day, and I supported it. So probably not the answer you want, probably not the answer that a lot of people want. I know that it was a contentious subject. If any of us had to do it again, there are some things that we would that we learned and that we would do differently and do better next time. But it was my first experience with any kind of legislature, anything, and it went from a thought to it's happening rather quickly, way faster than I ever expected. So again, apologize to the volunteer departments that it came as a surprise. We would learn from our mistakes if we have to do it again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one follow-up, one more. With regard, and this again goes to the charter, but it's regarding safety, and you know, your contention here throughout the preamble is that it's a safety bill. I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of how many incidents with safety over the 46 to 50 years that this has not been solved. What were we at a crisis level, and what number of fire incidences were we lucky to get away with? That's kind of a confusing way to ask that question, but if you can get a sense of that, you know, have the Butte-Silver residents have not been safe for 50 years? I just want to kind of drill down on that a minute, just to get your perception of what that safety bill issue is.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, the Career to Fire Department went on 5,200 calls just last year alone. You know, I have it in here actually. 191 fires, 193 hazardous material incidents, service calls 1,300. I can't give you a great answer on exactly how many calls that the volunteers responded to that was close to something bad happening. You have to understand that with emergency services, fire in particular, every time that personnel gets on that truck, they face a danger. We're going through the city with lights and sirens. Can't go 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's law, but we're flying around town risking their lives to help the community. So to narrow down how many times that a person might have been affected by safety, not unrealistic for me to answer that question. And over the 47 years, every single time there was a volunteer on scene and a paid fire department member was the incident command and gave orders on scene that were have no idea what their qualifications are. I get on scene and I tell a volunteer fireman, pack up, get your SCBA on, and go inside. I have no idea what their training is. I have no idea if they've ever trained on SCBA. I don't even know, well, I do know, they've never been fit tested with SCBAs. So every single call, we can add them up. In the last 47 years, somebody is in danger that we could have done better if we were trained to a different standard.
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, Zach, how many firefighters in the Career Fire Department are trained in OSHA hazmat, 40 hours and more?
Madam Chair, career
Yes.
fire department,
Mm-hmm.
all 39 of them.
How many career fire departments are trained in fit tested on their apparatus?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, all 39.
How many of the career fire department members are trained in hazmat response and have that ability to know which way the winds are blowing and how to evacuate a situation?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, all of them.
Thank you.
Mr. Osborne, if I could follow up on some of the safety, like what is the protocol? Like how do you report, how do we keep data with how things are going and who gets deployed where? For instance, like I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say that we had a fire here and you had to call out racetrack, for example. And then is there an after-action review of that incident that then we have data to look at, or how does that proceed, I guess?
Madam Chair, hypothetical situation. Today we have a fire, structure fire, maybe a rescue, maybe a death. Racetrack gets dispatched to that fire. The incident command on scene will give a very detailed fire report that we have to turn into the state every month. We have to turn in every report to the state every month. If we make mistakes on those reports, it gets kicked back to us. The fire marshal assistant chief reviews the report, reviews reports every morning, as do I. Review a report every morning. If something actually happens where there is a death or a rescue or a close call of a dangerous situation, the incident command always has an after-action review with the career department. If the volunteer department were involved in some kind of situation where it called for that after-action review to invite them, they absolutely have, and they do and have gotten that invite. Those reports are filed for decades and decades. So we go back, review all reports, learn from every call that they go on. So I hope I answered that question. It's always iffy. We do our best to reach out to the volunteers, invite them to training, invite them to our peer support and our after-action meetings. Do they always come? No, but most of the time they are invited, yes.
Okay, so in terms of mechanisms and structure, because we have this ambiguity between being autonomous and being part of Butte-Silver, there is maybe a lack of follow-through or a lack of we are required to participate. Like, for example, like your firemen sitting in the audience couldn't tell you they're not coming, right, to the after-action review or to, following their procedures or doing their training. But on the other side, our volunteers have that sense of autonomy of, well, we don't have to come, or we're volunteers. Am I getting the issue correct or the mechanism correct?
Yeah, Madam Chair, you're correct, on the right track. It's that's where our ordinance language comes in. I have full authority over all paid fire department personnel. So yes, if I say we're having a meeting and it's mandatory, if I say we're training and it's mandatory, they're here. That's where we get into the gray area or the confusion is within the ordinance, even within the charter, but I'll reference the ordinance, especially in my first question. It does not specifically state any kind of oversight or authority over the individuals of that volunteer department. It does buildings, vehicles, equipment, insurance. It says that I have complete oversight and authority over all the fire department buildings and equipment, but it does not specifically say the individual firefighters of the volunteer departments. So if I call a meeting and say it's mandatory, they can absolutely tell me no.
One more follow-up. I apologize, I'm dominating the floor, folks. When you were talking about, and I think we were talking about the districts, like where their service areas are, and in the 1974 opinion, was it, where we can't have both a city fire department and then also have the volunteers that are in that consolidated form. That was an opinion. And so if we were to try to clean this up, we still have that problem. Is that correct, as to your understanding, in terms of the different opinions that we've had from the attorney generals?
Madam Chair, that's where it's a little bit gray and confusing. We did have, so that was the state fire marshal that requested that question from the Attorney General in 1974. He gave his opinion that there shouldn't be volunteer fire departments supporting paid fire departments in a Class 1 city. At the time, like I explained, we were a Class 1 city. When we consolidated, we went to a unified city-county. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know legal. You'd have to, reach out to. I don't know if once we consolidated, then our Class 1 status went out the window. I'm not positive. I do know that Department of Labor, MMIA, Workman's Comp, Montana Fund, we insure all Butte-Silver employees, and they consider us a Class 1 city. So that is a question for an attorney and not a director of fire services, because I'm not sure about that one.
Thank you. Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, thank you. So with that, I would think, Zach, that if there was an incident, and whoever the incident commander is would be in charge of any volunteers that showed up at that time. So apparently that's not an ordinance, or it's not in the charter, but do you think it needs to be?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, no, it's not in the charter. There are some mention of being command in the ordinance, and that's where some confusion. It's a little convoluted. It does say multiple times throughout the ordinance language that the incident command of this incident might be a career fire member, but if it's inside a volunteer's district, then the incident command would have to transfer command to a volunteer department member after they get on scene. Very confusing. Has that happened? I don't remember that happening in my career. Did it happen years ago? Absolutely. Career fire department was on scene for 30, 40 minutes. Volunteer came in, said, "We're taking over command," and they backed away. Is that the best for the people? Absolutely not. That's where a clear chain of command is so important. That incident command for any scene is I can't describe how critical that job is, to oversee an entire incident and make sure everybody is doing their job, doing it correctly, doing it safely, and having the accountability of knowing the standards and knowing the radio language and knowing all the things that we train in case bad things are going to happen at those scenes, and you have to be ready for them, because they happen in a split second.
Mr. Steppen, or is yours a follow-up with that? Okay. Okay, perfect. Mr. Thielen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One other thing, and kind of you talked about that in your book here, but so with the volunteers having to be self-sufficient now with their bill, so they can put forth to have mills raised for taxes on people in their district. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, again, that would be a question for county attorney and a lawyer, but that probably should have been looked at in 1980 after House Bill 392 passed. But instead, Butte-Silver Bow had taken on their finances and hasn't stopped. Confusion has always plagued us. I mean, we've known since 1987 that Attorney General's letter has existed, but you have to be a lawyer to interpret what they're saying. There's a lot of whereas and where ifs and stuff that is over my head. So as far as what I've been told, that is one of the options. Their board of trustees would have to set up a levy inside their district to be funded.
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, just as a reminder, the county attorney was questions or gave the same questions last week regarding House Bill 547 and some of the historical analysis, Zach, that you did, and he will be coming back with his opinion regarding some of the legislative history and what it really means. So there is some question regarding and some confusion regarding all of that. So, but one thing that isn't confusing to me, at least as I read it, is the language in the charter. I think that provides us with a good stepping stone on what this should be, and if there's any changes to what we want to do in terms of organizational structure and change the charter, that's where our discussion should be done in Section 7 of the Fire Department Administrative Offices. But I've read it several times now, knowing that Zach and the Volunteer Fire Department next week will be here at the time of when that charter was created, and after 10 years of annual review, except for 20 years when Cindy was doing it. Those have been tweaked a little bit, but the language is still fairly clear to me. So I would suggest maybe we take a look at Section 7 of the charter and have some questions for the county attorney next week. But the county attorney is going to provide us with some of the things that I would imagine Zach and some of the volunteer fire departments question him before the legislature, and provide us with that opportunity to review that.
Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. And would it be appropriate at this time to move forward with our questions? I know you've prepared for all of those as well. Is there any other follow-ups? Okay. So Ms. Casey, if you could lead us off, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, what are the specific responsibilities and duties of the Butte-Silver Bow Fire Director?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, the Director of Fire Services is city county, excluding Walkerville and Melrose. So keep that in mind. They are two separate entities. The Director of Fire Services, I provide executive leadership and operational oversight for all fire suppression activities, both structural and wildland, within the city county of Butte-Silver Bow. I direct a diverse portfolio of specialized emergency response teams, including hazardous materials, technical rescue. Technical rescue includes high and low angle, swift water, ice, trench, drone operations, wildland fire management team. I also oversee our EMS program, SCBA system, and community risk reduction initiatives, such as our car seat installation program and our fire alarm program. I just gave you a little bit of statistical data there from 2024, so it's definitely not me making those 5,222 responses, but I do have to oversee everything that they are doing. We do have an average response time of 6 minutes, and all fire paid personnel performed 12,762 hours of training and activities last year, which equaled 29.54 hours per month per employee, which is over NFPA standards, so we did well. In addition to managing frontline operations, I'm also responsible for the Fire Marshal's Office, which includes fire prevention and investigation, as well as our peer support and health and wellness teams. I manage a roughly $6.7 million operational budget, which supports 11 buildings, fire stations. We have 11 stations, but 14 structures. In that budget also is 43 pieces of apparatus, 36 career firefighters, 2 dispatchers, 3 administrative staff, and 134 volunteer firefighters. I maintain active engagement in local and statewide policy and planning efforts as a member of the Montana Fire Chiefs Association, Montana Fire Wardens Association, the LEPC, 911 Committee, and Sheltering Committee. I serve as an ad hoc to several strategic committees in Butte, including the Fire Advisory, the Fire Commission, our IT Committee, and our Apparatus Committee. My leadership is rooted from collaborative service, operational excellence, and a commitment to safety and well-being of our community and personnel. I then went into all of the charter and ordinance language that mentions the Director of Fire Services. I'll spare those. So if you go right below where it says 2.16.610, after the ordinance. So what does all that mean after if you look at the ordinance? Here's what the interpretation shows from the ordinance, is that one, clear legal authority over all paid personnel, as in the ordinance 2.16.130, all buildings and apparatus in the fire department, in ordinance 2.16080, all fire department operations, and the administrative structure and coordination between the paid and volunteer fire services, as the charter references. The gray area is my oversight and authority over volunteer personnel. As I said earlier, oversight over the volunteers is implied, but it's not directly spelled out, even though I am responsible for all the equipment and infrastructure that they use. So as you listen to my earlier presentation, we are not your typical fire department. I am not your typical fire chief that you would see in other cities. Other cities have a fire chief with very specific and clear language that explains their intended role and their responsibilities. And as you can tell by my job title, I am not titled the fire chief. As ordinance, as we talked about, I am the Director of Fire Services, which was effective July 1, 1996. It also references, again, the Director of Fire Services moving from the Fire Chief in Ordinance 15.10.020 as number C, Chief, means the Director of Fire Services in Butte-Silver. My next pages are just my Director of Fire Services job description, so it gives the duties and responsibilities that I will spare you guys of, but and then the other page is just another breakdown of our 2024 in review total call volumes. So I hope I described well enough my job responsibilities and duties.
Follow up?
Zach, you said that Walkerville and Melrose are excluded. Who provides their fire services?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, so Walkerville and Melrose have their own fire tax. So both Walkerville and Melrose are charged our emergency service tax, which means we respond to all medical emergencies with our rescue units, but they charge their citizens their own fire tax. So they do not own any Butte-Silver equipment, buildings, apparatus. It should be noted that at times Walkerville does respond into Butte-Silver to provide assistance, and Butte-Silver always goes to Melrose or Walkerville in the case of a fire to provide assistance. So they are not part of our Butte-Silver Fire Department.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Zach, especially for that introduction. I mean, I know there's opinions in there, and every legal opinion is an opinion, still the same word, and you're not on trial here. Just, we would love to hear what you have to say. That's what we're here to do. We're here to review and recommend. That's really, I just tell everybody that's what we do. We're not here to talk about personnel matters or anything like that. But on Lori Casey's question, Walkerville Melrose, is that all paid, or is there a volunteer combined in that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, they are volunteers in both.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, could you explain what, and I'm glad you put this underneath the ordinance of Director of Fire Services stuff with the interpretation. So clear and legal authority over, paid personnel, buildings, apparatus, fire operations, and it says the administrative structure and coordination between paid and volunteer services. What does that look like, structure and coordination between paid and volunteer? Do you do outreach to the different fire halls or volunteer departments and get that communication back and forth and to find out what their needs are or concerns are? I'm just curious what that looks like, that fourth bullet.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yeah, we have a. I personally like to do all email so that I can see what I have in my inbox and see what I have maybe forgot to answer or that I need to archive. So I do have an email chain with the volunteer chiefs. We go over what their needs are. Most of the time, it's through the fire advisory meetings. Their needs, a lot were met in previous years with TIFID funds, TIFID money that came from Montana Connections. So at one time there was a couple $1 million in that TIFID fund, and it had ran out last year. So most of our conversations, most of the needs that were met came through fire advisory and through that TIFID fund. So fire advisory, up until not too long ago, the Director of Fire Services was more than just an ad hoc. He was required to be there most of the time because it had to do with spending money. So the director has the final say in that. So yeah, most of our conversations and dealings with structure and providing what their needs are was through that fire advisory meetings through TIFID.
Excellent. Are we ready to move to a second question? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you again. And I don't want to think if you have a tough question that we're grilling you. It's not a grilling session, of course, like Cindy said. But there are, this is probably one of the more contentious things that we have to listen to. So I want to make sure we have absolute clarity. So thank you for that. So number 2 is, what are the most critical problems presently confronting the fire department?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I started off, these are my critical problems in bold. Budget and funding is a critical structural problem for us. So the Department of Revenue recognizes Butte-Silver as a single special taxing district. And within this framework, Butte-Silver Fire Department operates, like I said earlier, on a approximately $6.7 million annual budget. In that fire fund, we are responsible for covering wages and benefits for 36 operational full-time firefighters, 1 office assistant, 1 assistant chief fire marshal, 1 director of fire services, 2 dispatchers. We also maintain 14 fire station buildings, 43 pieces of fire apparatus, all equipment associated with those units, and currently support those 134 active volunteer firefighters. So this structure is not just complex, it's critically strained. According to City County's own budget documents, our volunteer departments do not control their tax levies, so they are in our fire fund. All funds come through one unified fire fund, and that centralized system is bearing the weight of 2 fully staffed fire stations and 9 volunteer stations, serving only a roughly population of 35,000 people. And to my knowledge, this is an extreme and unsustainable financial model. We are trying to provide modern, safe, and effective fire protection services under a structure that has not evolved to match the demands or financial realities of today. Without a serious, informed discussion about how we fund and manage this system, the strain will only increase, and the quality of our safety of our services will inevitably suffer. I have a star there to give Helena Fire Department comparison. So, Helena Fire Department has, just like Butte Fire Department, roughly a $6.7 million budget. Within the Helena Fire Department, they have 2 career stations with 38 operational members and about 7 or 8 admin. 2 buildings with 14 pieces of apparatus. Okay, so 2 buildings, about 40 employees, and 14 apparatus. We have the same budget, and we have 36 employees, 1 office assistant, 1 assistant chief, 1 director of fire services, 2 dispatchers, 14 fire stations, 43 pieces of apparatus, and currently support all 134 active volunteer fire department members. Remember, just a coat and a pair of pants cost about $4,000. So our budget compared to Helena's is at a significant strain. Then I have a little star asterisk, and in 2024, after many years of watching the gap close, we finally hit our budget cap. Explain. So I'm going to explain it to you. When in 2019, end of 2019. Anyway, I knew the chief director of fire services, Jeff Miller, was set to retire, and I was a captain at the time. I didn't quite know if I wanted to interview and test to be the assistant chief or the chief. I just knew I needed to get some of his knowledge before he left. And he said, no matter what position you're in, Zach, just know you're going to run into 2 major problems when I leave. One is the relationship with the volunteers, and 2 is we're going to hit our cap. And we had heard that saying for so long. Chief Miller used to just say it. Hey, we're getting closer to our cap. We got to be careful for the budget. Getting closer to the cap. Well, a couple years go by, and Chief Miller is retired, and now I'm in this position, and it's 2021, and I go meet with our head of finance, Danette Gleason. I said, "What's my biggest challenge going to be?" She said, "Within 2 years, you're going to hit your cap." I said, well, "I heard that from Jeff. What's that mean?" She said, "Your wages and your benefits and all of the vehicles and all the buildings, they are going to reach the maximum amount of money that you are bringing in. You've hit your cap." I said, "Okay, well, do we have a plan?" Not really. So I get a phone call last year at about 10 o'clock at night from Karen Hassler, and they were doing the final budgets, and she said, "Zach, I got some news for you. You guys hit your cap." So I had 3 of 5 years built of a SCBA capital improvement plan to replace all SCBAs in the whole county for paid and volunteer stations. I had a couple $100,000 built in that capital improvement plan. And they said, where can we take the money from? I said, "That's the only money I have." So they had to take the only capital improvement money that I had to cover our cap. So, critical problem. We are at our cap. Fire trucks are getting expensive. All of our apparatus is aging, and maintenance with everything is atrocious. So that is a major critical problem. Okay, next critical problem is, like a few other members that I've seen watch in this study commission, but we have severe staffing shortages in operations and in admin. Staffing is one of the most critical issues facing the fire department today, both in operations and in administration, and it's placing our personnel and the public at serious risk. So operations. We currently have 36 career personnel operating on a 4 platoon system. As a result of this, 54% of the time we are functioning with only 6 firefighters on duty across the entire city county. This means we're running 3 fire engines, all cross-staffed. Cross-staffed means those 2 firefighters might be on the rescue and an engine the same day, or the ladder and an engine the same day. So depending on the call, which calls come in at the same time often, they might be bouncing back and forth between vehicles. But they are all cross-staffed with just 2 personnel each. And I broke down January through December, 365 days. So 196 days out of the 365, we only operated with 6 people. And then 126 days, 7, 34 days, 8 personnel, 9 days, we were at maximum staff, which is 9 personnel. So this is not efficient. This is dangerous. Everything we do is based off of NFPA standards. That's National Fire Protection Association standards, whether it's inspections, operations, equipment, or safety protocols. NFPA Standard 1710 clearly recommends a minimum of 4 firefighters per engine. We run with 2 to perform safe and effective operations. When we respond with just 2 firefighters on an engine, as we do 97.53% of the time, we are knowingly putting our crews at risk and diminishing our ability to safely protect the public. A recent comprehensive fire study, the study recommends that we immediately add 8 firefighters to our ranks this year. But our budget, like I explained, is maxed out. We cannot hire even 1 more firefighter under the current funding constraints. Administration. Administration staff is in just as dire need. I previously provided the commission with the breakdown of the Helena Fire Department's administration. They operate with 8 administrative personnel, including positions such as the Assistant Chief of Operations, Assistant Chief of Training, Fire Prevention, Fire Marshal, Deputy Marshal, inspectors, as well as the Fire Chief. This model is not just unique to Helena. This is the industry norm for the department, for any department of similar size and complexity. Our administrative staff, we have 2. Myself as the Director of Fire Services, and I also serve as the Chief of Operations, the Finance Manager, and frequently the backup Fire Marshal and Inspector. Kelly Lee is our Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal, who is effectively covering the work of 4 roles, as said in that fire study that we have: the Assistant Chief, the Fire Marshal, the Fire Investigator, and the Fire Inspector. It should be noted when we're talking about administration that the Assistant Chief of Operations, that title is in our ordinance in 2.16.212, but that position has not been filled since Bob Dumasich retired in 1990. So we are not keeping up. We are barely staying afloat. New initiatives, not even a possibility. We're struggling just to maintain the basics. So I've given this idea to a few, and they say, what about the volunteers? You have 134 of them that are available. They might not be available, is the thing. They're not reliable 24 hours a day. They're volunteers. How could you expect them to make every single call that they got called on? They have jobs. That's just unrealistic. Plus, The 1974 Attorney General opinion states that we shouldn't supplement our career firemen with volunteers. While that Attorney General opinion, those opinions are advisory and not a binding law. However, they represent the state's legal interpretation, and agencies are generally expected to follow them, but we haven't. We've relied heavily on volunteers to fill those gaps, often out of necessity because we're only responding with 6 people on shift. Not because it's a sustainable or legally sound model. This raises serious concerns of compliance, liability, and safety. So in summary, we are operating below safe staffing levels. We are out of balance administratively. Our budget is capped, and our continued reliance on volunteers as frontline operational support in a maybe first-class city may not withstand legal or ethical scrutiny. So we need a plan, we need support, we need it now, the safety of our firefighters and for the people of Butte-Silver. Next is liability, a system under serious legal and operational risk. One of the most pressing questions we must face is, what is our liability if something goes wrong? What if there is a death in a fire? Is the incident commander legally liable for decisions made during a scene? What if a volunteer is involved in a fatal accident while driving Butte-Silver vehicle with no Butte-Silver oversight or formal training? Is Butte-Silver liable? Yes, I believe we are, and the law supports that belief. Charter authority and legal oversight under section 7.03 of the charter, as you guys know. This is not optional. It is mandated by both internal policy and state law, including the Montana Safety Culture Act, which is enforced by the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, and our safety policy and workers' compensation. Butte-Silver safety, formal safety and health policy, Policy 131 states, the city county shall comply with all occupational safety, health, and environmental laws mandated by relevant state and federal law or regulation and executive order. This policy applies to anyone performing work on behalf of Butte-Silver, which includes all volunteers, search and rescue, volunteers at the library, and so on. These individuals are also explicitly covered under our workmen's compensation policy. That coverage means we carry legal and financial responsibility for their actions and for any injuries or claims. And Montana law is very clear. MCA reinforces this. MCA 39 includes volunteer firemen as employees for workers' compensation purposes. MCA 7-33 4109 defines the role of a volunteer fireman within a city fire system. MCA 50-71-12112 gives the Montana Department of Labor and Industry jurisdiction over public sector safety programs like our responsibilities directly to the Workers' Compensation Act. In short, if a department receives public funding, insurance, or uses city-county assets, it is required to follow all state and local safety regulations. If something goes wrong, Butte-Silver is legally and financially liable. A dangerous structural contradiction. Right now, 9 volunteer fire departments and over 130 volunteers fall under the city-county's liability framework. They are covered under our workmen's compensation plan and operate using public-funded assets, but we lack the oversight and authority to enforce consistent training, operational protocols, or risk management standards across these departments. As James Olette, Butte-Silver Safety and Health Coordinator, put it, we are responsible for outcomes, but cannot control inputs. We are legally liable, but structurally powerless. We are required to act, but often denied the authority to do so. This liability crisis is waiting to happen if we don't address the governance, oversight, and training inconsistencies within our fire department. We are gambling with both public safety and taxpayer money. Another major issue is attempting to manage the unknown. One of the greatest challenges I face as the director is managing the unknown. How do I, or any other director, effectively lead when the boundaries of oversight are so unclear? I'm responsible for signing bills, providing equipment, and making administrative decisions, but I've never received a clear definition of where my authority begins and ends. Conflicting ordinance language. This confusion is compounded by conflicting ordinance language. In one ordinance, the director has clear authority, but only over the paid department. In another, that authority is broadened or changed. One section states that volunteer departments cannot respond outside of their districts, yet another section describes responses across the county. These contradictions create a patchwork of rules that are difficult to follow and impossible to enforce. It's inconsistent, makes no sense, and it undermines effective leadership. Safety and standards across all departments. At the core of this is the safety of every firefighter, volunteer and paid, and the public we serve. Right now, not all fire personnel are trained to the same standard. They are not held to the same level of accountability. As a result, we are not delivering the best possible service to the people of Butte-Silver Bow, and we should be. The community deserves better, and every member of every department deserves to operate within a clear, consistent, and safe system.
Okay, that was a lot, thank you. I'm very appreciative of the printed materials because I think maintaining all of this information in our brains would be impossible, so I appreciate that. I have a couple of questions and then I'll turn to Mr. Dennehy. Can you please provide the comprehensive fire study to this commission for us to review? I think that would help us with some of these bigger questions that you are bringing forward to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then for the good of folks watching on YouTube and the good of the order here, when you're talking about your budget cap, you're talking about your taxable authority, is that correct?
Madam Chair, correct.
Okay, so we'd have to increase levies to increase your budget, is that right?
Madam Chair, correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dennehy?
You asked my question, thank you. The smart one, yeah. No, I was asking about the levies, so thank you.
Quick follow-up too, a lot of the things that you mention in here refer back to ordinance, which again is not necessarily the work of this group, that is the work of our Council of Commissioners, and so we are allowed to make recommendations. And so I'm hearing that you would like us to consider recommending to the council that they really review ordinance regarding how your structure is set up, is that correct? Are you looking for changes to charter specifically? Maybe this is coming in your next questions.
Madam Chair, a recommendation from this body would be greatly appreciated and huge for me. If you read through our ordinance, it is just, it's out of whack. It doesn't make sense. I don't know if a recommendation can be made by this body and maybe a group of the 12 commissioners can get together and we can sit down and see what works, but that's been a talk for a long time. It was one of the things Jeff Miller, said that he wished he would have done.
Well, and to be clear, our recommendation has to be thoughtful and listening to all parties involved of what that might be. So we're only hearing from you so far, so we have the rest of everyone to hear from. But it does sound like, I think you've said in the history, it's been 40 years or 50 years now of nothing getting changed, or things may be trying to be changed, but they've been ineffectual. So perhaps that could be something that this body comes back with in terms of make sure that we do a comprehensive review of ordinance so that we are set your structure, the structure needed for the volunteers and for paid to be as sound as possible. But again, we have a lot of work to do, so I'm just wanting your opinion of what you need, what you're bringing forward to us.
Thank you.
Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, my question is along the lines of the ordinance. Have you put in a formal request to the Council of Commissioners to clear up these conflicting ordinances? And I'm asking because we can recommend, but also our job isn't going to be done until 2026 and that recommendation going forward. And I would think with all the problems that have been brought to light that maybe the Council of Commissioners would want to start earlier than that, to start potentially cleaning up some of the conflicts in ordinance that are under their authority?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I've been in this position for almost 4 years. We have done a few restructured little ordinance language, did an ordinance change of our fire commission and how we do interviews, promotions. I think if I could, to answer your question, no, I haven't brought forth any of the major concerns to the council. Now that the TIFID money is gone and fire advisory meetings could maybe look at different things rather than just how to spend the TIFID money, maybe that's something that we could sit down and try to figure out there, because I haven't brought anything forth just because of the relationship that's currently going on.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Zach, thank you for that answer and all the information. Again, it's very much appreciated being in a folder. When was the last firefighter hire or administrative hire? And do you think that, so that's like question one. Follow-up to that would be, we have 43 apparatus versus Helena, and your example of Helena, 14 pieces of equipment for roughly the same size. Are you kind of equating size to Helena, right? So is it something where we have too much stuff to maintain? Is it something where we could do some streamlining, or is that all necessary? And I'm just curious about the hiring.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, are you talking about just filling positions that were already filled, or totally new positions?
I'm just wanting to find out when the last firefighter hire was. I mean, because if you're reaching this cap and it was like this ominous thing coming at you, have you hired anybody, or are you, because of that cap, you're going, no, I'm not going to do any hiring or fill in? So yeah, just explain that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, we just hired 2 individuals about a month ago. They were A1 ambulance employees and Big Butte volunteers that we hired after 2 retirees earlier this year. So we cannot hire until we get budget authority. As soon as the 2 people that retired are totally paid out by the county, then we can go ahead and hire those 2 new individuals, which in turn is a little bit of cost savings, because normally you're a captain or a battalion chief of 30 years is going to retire, so you hire on somebody that is just a probationary firefighter. So that is a little bit of cost savings, but in my knowledge, a chief executive or a head of finance has never told us in quite a while that we could not hire because we're over budget. They always try to at least keep us to where we were. Administratively, Kelly Lee and I were the last people hired, and that was promoted, and that was in 2020. And we just came right from the floor, or from operations, so they filled our positions as soon as they could. And I'm sorry, what was your second part of your question?
Sorry about that, combining them both. Just about the apparatus, that's a big differential between 43 pieces of equipment and 14.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner. 2 reasons why I directly correlate us with Helena. They have roughly the same budget. It's about $6.6 million budget with 2 career stations. So they have 14 pieces of apparatus. We have 43. They have 2 buildings to maintain. We have 14. Do I think that we could kind of get rid of a few of our vehicles that are just not getting used? Absolutely. However, anything outside, I think, of the career department, I need 2/3 vote to do anything with I need 2/3 vote of the Council of Commissioners for any kind of apparatus moving in the volunteer ranks. So even if we consolidate some vehicles that aren't getting used, 2/3 vote would be needed in the Council of Commissioners. But there are vehicles that have sat for years and have not been used, and it's too bad, really. But it's just not helping our budget. And I think if we did do that, it would at least make things a little bit easier. But that comes with some pretty heavy conversations with the volunteer council and the volunteer chief that unfortunately just for years and decades has not been too healthy. So hope I answered your question there.
Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, I just, when you talk about Helena, you're just talking about the city. Isn't there a bigger county area, and don't they have their own volunteers with their own equipment that should be encapsulated in this comparison as well?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yeah, so they have, let's see, Helena might have East Helena, and then they do have the volunteer departments at the lake that all have volunteers, buildings. Again, I mostly just try to compare the $6.7 million budget and what they have for that amount of money compared to what we have for that amount of money. It's not comparing where the volunteers are, but Helena does have volunteers in their outlying areas in rural settings. They do not have volunteers inside their city.
So wouldn't that be true that they would have, those volunteer departments would have their levy authority? Like they would be raising their own money for out by the lake, et cetera, and East Helena would be raising its own money? Is that correct?
Madam Chair, correct. Their board of trustees manage their levies, manage their bonds, and financially operate their departments.
Okay, so there's a little bit of false equivalency, but it's fair to say, we're having $6 million budgets, but it's just a different structure, I think, with the volunteer departments there compared to the city department there.
I just think it's really not appropriate to talk about equipment because I think you'd have to include even though they have their own levy, you'd have to consider with the volunteers. And I do think it's important to remember, Helena is about twice the population that Butte-Silver is. Not saying that you don't deserve more money, because I think you do, but.
Yeah, I understand where you're going, Ms. McCormick. I agree with it's gray and shades of gray and nuance, so we're not making it, I guess we're not putting data forward, we're rather just sharing information to help us consider. Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Osborne, I just have some questions. It's related to the charter. In the charter, it says, that you will oversee the fire department of a fire department, but then in section D, that's really where we get hung up. And it says, except as otherwise provided by this charter in section D or until changed by ordinance. And although the ordinance has been changed, the House Bill 392 makes it to where we are required to specifically put that the Director of Fire Services is fully in charge of the fire department, if that's how it sees fit. Do you believe that you would have a better capable workforce when volunteers arrive on scene knowing that the training that they have is with the career department? Do you think those select few volunteers would make it safer for the community?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, absolutely. It's If the volunteers trained with the career department, if the career department trained with the volunteer department, they would essentially be on the same page when they arrived on scene. It's similar to the example I used for a football team. The offensive line normally doesn't go off on its own and practice without speaking anything to the quarterback or running back, and the quarterback and running back don't practice alone and then expect to come to a game and know what they're doing. They can do little things on their own, but they need to come together and be on the same page, so that operations just run more smooth. The IC knows exactly what's the capability of each firefighter, and also which volunteers are going to show up, which volunteers he has seen. You know, that's a big thing, is you look around at these different personnel that are showing up, and I'm going to use Mr. Silk as an example. He's a battalion chief at the fire department for many years, but he might look around and never have seen that person. So he has no idea what the capabilities are. So the training as a team is super important, as I've said many times before.
Follow up to that, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I'm not going to go down any rabbit holes here. I lived in the safety world of emergency services and understand the importance of it. And again, as I mentioned before in other meetings, if you have any questions about what safety problems there are within the community, please come ask me after this meeting. There are numerous ones that we deal with, not only for career members, but volunteer members. And as a critical risk of safety and standards across all departments, as listed in Director Osborne's question, it is a critical need. And for some to say that it's not, I would just ask again to ask both sides and members of the public to be open to the conversations and open to listening. And I know that some people will not, but I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could follow up with both of you regarding structure. So you were pointing to Section 7.03, item D, until changed by ordinance. So there's not in ordinance currently something about cross-training together. Is that correct? And that would be something you would be looking for. Is that right? Or hoping for, perhaps?
Madam Chair, that's something that we would definitely look into, yes.
And I was asking, making it, so this is the problem. The charter, which is supposed to set our structure and be vague, so our ordinances can adapt with the ever-changing times, because we might not have a charter review in 20 years and things change, right? It says, or until changed by ordinance. And in the ordinance, it says that the Director of Fire Service will have full command and control. But our ordinances essentially don't matter because it's not specifically stated in the charter. So that was one question that I would have for County Attorney Enruth, is although that it says it's in ordinance and we're supposed to go from charter to ordinance and run our community, there's a roadblock there. And if that roadblock is there for our legislative branch to run our community, we need to get rid of that roadblock. If this was any other department, that would, besides the fire department, that would not happen. That would have been changed a long time ago. That is something that I think this body needs to look into, and that the public is aware that the Director of Fire Services has been challenged with these problems, or the Chief Executive has been challenged with these problems. And although the problems have been, we've tried to deal with these problems through ordinance, because our charter allows us to do so, we're still unable to follow our ordinance. So that's something that I imagine the county attorney would be able to clarify for me. And maybe I'm not stating that in the best way where everyone understands, but it's definitely a question that structurally in our government, as you mentioned before in other meetings, and I'm paraphrasing, creating the backbone for our community, this part is broke. So that's where I was going with that question. And when the county attorney gets here, he'll probably be able to clarify a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. I was looking for what the intention or the need was, so I appreciate that. Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to wait till number 3, but I think because what Chad said, I want to follow up and ask, Zach, you know, I think one of the things that was confusing, a quick little preface, with the HB 547 was that it included Anaconda. And as the bill was going through the legislature, Anaconda kind of went by the wayside, and it was just really talking about Butte. And so my question is, with regard to the charter and changing the charter language, have you thought about, and I'm guessing you probably have, about the Anaconda structure and the autonomy the fire services have over in that other consolidated government? Is that a structure taking the fire department kind of and making that, creating that autonomy? In talking with the chief executive over in Anaconda, he was saying that, you know, there are really no issues. It works really well. That was his direct quote to me. And so I'm wondering your thoughts on the compare and contrast with obviously what, and I agree with Chad, the charter language in Butte's charter should be definitely worked on because it's not clear. But have you decided or thought about implementing possibly or requesting the language and the autonomy with Anaconda Deer Lodge County?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, definitely different, like you said. We're two consolidated governments. Anaconda Deer Lodge consolidated a year after Butte-Silver, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and they saw the difficulties of the Butte-Silver Fire Department, of what they were going through. So they decided to consolidate everything but the fire department. So they kept the city, the Anaconda City Fire Department as is, and I'm not sure how many there is volunteer fire departments in Anaconda Deer Lodge, but you're right, they kept them separate from the fire department, so they are completely separate from their government. So they have their board of trustees that manage their levies and their bonds and operation. Would that work here? Is that what you asked? Well, we're just so different because those volunteer departments in Anaconda are considered in a rural setting. They are on the outlying areas of Anaconda. That East Anaconda, I don't know if, I'm not sure if they have hydrants in that area, but normally a rural fire department is considered a fire department that does not have city utilities. A lot of places, Bozeman, for example, as soon as the city moves far enough and brings utilities into that area, like Highlight in Bozeman, it's an automatic annexation of that volunteer department. But rural departments, we're just not quite the same as Anaconda, being that we have so many, basically 7 of the 9 departments in our fire department are definitely not rural. They're in the middle of a neighborhood with all city utilities, including fire hydrants, multiple of them. So our rural departments would be considered Terra Verde and Little Basin Creek. Rocker even is surrounded by hydrants, as is Centerville, Big Butte, and all of them. So we are a little bit different there, just because we have so many in that area inside the city boundaries, I guess, so you would call it. But I would have to read their charter and their ordinance to get like I should do that just to see what their language even looks like.
That would be great. I think our commission here would benefit greatly from your reading of Anaconda's charter with the fire piece, and give your opinion as to what's good in it, what's bad in it, and it might be some good suggestions that you have for our group. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, are we ready for question 3? Mr. Thielen, can we take question 3 and then I will, do you need a recess after question 3? Okay, so let's take question 3, please.
Madam Chair, thank you. Zach, here we go again. What changes, if any, in governmental structure, organization, or powers would help the fire department address its most critical problems?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, every department needs clear authority, a defined chain of command, established liability protocols, structural consistency, and enforceable safety standards. But for the fire department, these elements are not just bureaucratic boxes to check. They are essential for protecting lives, both inside and outside the organization. Right now, we are operating within a framework that lacks all of those things in a cohesive way. The current fire department ordinance language is convoluted, contradicts itself, as I've mentioned before. We have overlapping, conflicting definitions of authority, unclear lines of oversight between paid and volunteer divisions, contradictions regarding operational jurisdiction and response areas, and no unified mechanism for enforcing safety training or accountability standards. This lack of clarity doesn't just make it hard to lead, it puts people in danger. It also opens the city-county to significant legal and financial risk. A comprehensive review and revision of the fire department ordinance language would be a critical first step towards resolving these structural issues. This review should be collaborative, including all stakeholders, career, volunteer, legal, and administrative, and informed by state law, NFPA standards, and the recent fire study findings that I'll share with you. Guidance from the county attorney and safety and risk staff would also be greatly appreciated. We need to stop trying to operate a modern fire system with a disjointed, outdated foundation. It's time to bring clarity, consistency, and accountability to the structure of fire services in Butte-Silver for the safety of our personnel and the protection of our community and sustainability of our system. I only reference their ordinance language, and I also want to say something about BSB Charter 7.03F. It states the paid fire chief shall be the director of fire services and shall be responsible for the administrative coordination and combination of the paid and volunteer fire departments, fire prevention, and code enforcement. So even though, like Commissioner Dennehy stated earlier that he likes the way that the charter is written, and Commissioner Silk said at the bottom there that there was some language, that administrative coordination and combination could also throw a little confusion to people. Administrative coordination. I tried to look that up, and it really isn't quite clear what exactly that it means. So I referenced a lot of things that I would love looked at in the ordinance on that question, but as far as our charter goes, I'd need some help clarifying administrative coordination. I get that the fire chief or director of fire services tries to coordinate administratively between the departments, but really doesn't say anything about overseas operations or anything like that. So that would be my answer for number 3. And I hope I answered that good enough.
Very thoughtful. Mr. Dennehy, do you have your follow-up question?
So Zach, and we've asked every department head and director this question, and you brought a lot of information today, and I appreciate that. And we all appreciate that to think about. But one of the constant issues and questions we asked everyone else is, what is your thoughts on the current chief executive situation or city manager situation? And what is your thought about the number of commissioners, council of commissioners that we have? Is it just about right? Do we need more? Do we need less? And I know that some of this has been, we gave some information on question number 5, but we'd like to have maybe you touch on it if you feel comfortable about touching on it, and have your opinion on that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, my opinion on our current structure. I'll start with the chief executive. I see him getting, I see Mr. Gallagher getting pulled in 1,000 different directions. And it's hard to expect him to be up to speed with every possible department and be at every single meeting and speak at every single opening ceremony. So my opinion there would maybe be some kind of assistant to the chief executive. And I've watched a number of these, so I know what other people have said. And I would hate to have it as another elected official. Then you're tied maybe to an election, and everybody hears the different language of, you get elected every 4 years and you got to start all over and try to build these departments. And so maybe just an assistant that is appointed maybe every 6 years, so that it's offset of the chief executive, so that when the chief executive term ends and he or she decides to run again or not run again or lose or win, that assistant could still be in there and still be educated and still be up to speed with every department that's working in Butte-Silver Bow. I don't even know what you would call it. I don't know if city managers are normally elected or if they're appointed. I know mayors and chief executives are obviously elected, but just kind of some educated an assistant. I know he has his chief of staff, Mr. Cambich, but in addition, I would say. I've seen how stretched thin a chief executive here is. As far as 12 commissioners, too many in my honest opinion. 4 or 6, I don't want to get into the exact number because I don't know. I don't have the foresight to say that this perfect situation would work, but 12 part-time employees is just a lot to ask. I have it in my question number 5, is a lot to ask of a part-time employee. I don't think we need 12 commissioners to represent our community. I'm going to give you an example. During a recent council meeting, one of the commissioners openly admitted, he said, "I have a full-time job. I don't have time to read through everything." And how could he? There is so much going on in Butte-Silver Bow that if I had a full-time job and it was just my nighttime part-time job to be here every Wednesday, and now it's my obligation to know every single thing of what is going on, unrealistic and too much to ask. I applaud every single person that has sat in one of those seats, because I couldn't imagine showing up and not being fully engaged as a part-time employee should be, right? So too many. My thoughts are less and have them full-time.
I think I snuck in getting question 5 answered, but we've asked this follow-up pretty much at this point in the process, so I appreciate you getting number 5 out of the way for us too, so that's good. Commissioners, I would like to recess us for 10 minutes, so if we could reconvene at 7:20, and I'm sorry you're still on the hot seat, as it were.
It's fine.
If so, we can take our recess and reconvene at 7:20, please.
Is there water in that?
if we could, we're a couple minutes early of when I said I'd reconvene, but if we can go ahead and reconvene, I'd appreciate it, since we're all back. All right, and I believe we are on question 4, and it's you, Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Osborne, my question is, what advice would you give to the Study Commission in terms of conducting a comprehensive and impactful review of the local government?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, like I said, I've watched a few different ones of these, and usually many directors take this opportunity to thank you guys for sitting on this board and listening to the directors and coming up with a strategic plan for the betterment of Butte-Silver. So I want to do the same. So thank you. Thanks for putting your name in the hat, and congratulations for getting elected, and you guys get to sit and do this, but thank you. Meeting every Monday night is quite the effort to learn about each department, and it's no small task. What advice? My advice for this commission is twofold. Number one would be prioritize open communication, and please reach out and engage with all parties involved in the fire department. It is absolutely appropriate for you to form your own opinions, but I urge you to do so only after hearing from all sides. If you attend volunteer fire council meetings, I encourage you to also attend a few union meetings with the paid department. I also welcome the opportunity to meet with you personally, along with our administrative staff. Only by hearing from all stakeholders will you then have a full context to make decisions that truly serve the best interests of our community. And number two, commit to structured research. So with the help of others, I can't take full credit for that first intro information that I gave you. I'm not quite that intelligent, but I've worked to compile a substantial amount of data, including legal interpretations, charter language, ordinance language, and state law that outlines the structure and history of our department and how we arrived at this point. I encourage you not to only review the materials I've provided, but go beyond them. Seek additional input from knowledgeable individuals, such as County Attorney Matt Enruth and his staff, Butte-Silver Safety and Health Coordinator James Ollett, former Director of Fire Services Jeff Miller, Butte-Silver Archives Director Aubrey Japp and her team, and many more. But this process for you will be difficult, but your efforts to thoroughly research and understand the issues will result in a stronger, better informed outcome for Butte-Silver. That's my advice for you guys.
Thank you. Follow-up questions. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd love to attend a union paid department meeting because I have sat in on several of the volunteer meetings. Could you tell us when you meet? And obviously they're open to the public, are they, or just for commission members?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, they are open to the public when they notify the union so that they know that they're coming. I'm out of the union, but I know exactly they're the first Friday of every month at 10 o'clock? At 10 o'clock. So 10 a.m., yes. John Leibel is our union president. I can get you his contact information. They're good meetings. I haven't sat in one for a few years now, but great personnel. They would be ecstatic if some of you came just to listen to their concerns, ideas, interests, and as well as my office. I mean, the administrative office there, Kelly and I and the battalion chiefs would love to sit down at your guys' convenience and answer anything that maybe I forgot to say or you guys needed to follow up and I talked too much on a different question. So anybody is welcome. I'll get anybody's numbers and contact information if you need.
Where is the meeting held?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, the meeting is at Station 1 at 120 South Idaho in the main station.
Any other follow-up questions? All right. Mr. Dennehy, you have number 5, if we wanted to add to that at all.
I already asked number 5. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Asked and answered. I have a follow-up question. I was told to shut up tonight, so keep us on track. So when you were speaking of, bringing forward the issues and trying to create resolution, and within inefficiencies, we were talking about maybe a smaller commission or a city manager versus a chief executive. And it seems to me in all of our issues that we've heard about, this one becomes inherently political. And so coming to the place where we can create resolutions and perhaps make some very hard decisions. Do you think it would be more efficient if we had perhaps a city manager that you were working through, or maybe if there were a special commission just to look at the fire ordinances within that, you have the fire advisory board, but maybe there's a few people to add to that. Like, how do we make this process more efficient and take it out of, I'm running for chief executive, so I visited with all of you, right? So, and make sure that we're making decisions in the greater good. Like, do you have any suggestions for that?
Madam Chair, yes, you're correct. This is a very difficult situation. The fire department is very political, which we don't want it to be, but that's just the nature of our structure. When I brought these issues forth to Chief Executive Gallagher, it took a long time just for him to understand the complexity of it. And if that person is only elected every 4 years and that's the only person you're trying to deal with, it's very difficult, because it might take them 4 years to understand what is going on, let alone try to make any type of improvements. So, a city manager that could possibly concentrate more on these important issues, rather than maybe hustling around town trying to make a cut the ribbon type of a thing. So, your other example, get a smaller group of commissioners to work through these issues. Absolutely. I've been up at this stand numerous times trying to explain things or defend things, and it's just not realistic to try to get 12 commissioners to agree on everything, as well as a chief executive. So a city manager that could concentrate on the issue, a smaller group of commissioners absolutely would maybe get everybody in the room. It would be easier to get everybody in the room. That's been a lot of times the most difficult part of it all, is to try to get everybody that you think are stakeholders in the room and try to explain this situation and how we got to where we are, and laws and state this and ordinance that, and it's a lot. When I first became the director, I was so confused on all of this stuff. My head was spinning. So, and I've been with the department for years. So somebody that doesn't have a history with our department now is expected to know what the history of the department is, and it's just unrealistic. So a smaller group of commissioners, possibly a city manager would definitely help, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Silk, I think you're up for number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Osborne, what challenges do you foresee for Butte-Silver in the next 10 to 20 years? And does the current government structure position the city-county to meet those challenges effectively?
Madam Chair, Commissioner. In Butte-Silver, we operate under a consolidated charter government. We are no longer a traditional city or a traditional county. We are a single entity empowered by our local charter. However, that legal clarity is not always reflected in how state laws are written or interpreted. Take fire service, for example. Under Montana law, volunteer fire departments weren't intended to operate within the boundaries of a first-class city. Without our consolidated government, we would have had to formally annex volunteer stations outside city limits just to comply with state statute. But thanks to our charter, we avoided that at the cost of persistent confusion, as I have a lot. Our urban core is being treated as if it were rural. We have volunteer stations just a mile away from fully staffed paid fire stations. This really doesn't make sense for a planning, safety, or operational perspective. When you search volunteer fire department, Montana Code annotated, you don't find a clearly defined standalone entity. Instead, you find patchwork of legal frameworks, rural fire district of that MCA, fire services, areas of 7-33-2401 MCA, and municipal fire departments 7-33-4101 MCA, where volunteers can serve, but only in second and third class cities. Meanwhile, in Butte-Silver, volunteers outnumber paid fire department members by more than a ratio of 3 to 1. That raises some serious concerns. If that staffing ratio reflects real operational needs, then we should be having a conversation about expanding our paid fire service. We cannot continue to rely on the volunteer model that lacks a clear legal foundation, doesn't align with expectations of urban fire protection, and potentially exposes us to federal labor violations. Our consolidated government deserves a unified, modern legal framework, one that supports safe, lawful, and efficient service delivery for the people of Butte-Silver. So to answer that question, in 10 to 20 years, I sure hope the fire department has some clarity. I hope the next director of fire services can concentrate on new initiatives for the future. And no, the current structure does not position us to meet challenges effectively, like I've mentioned in the previous question. It is unrealistic to expect 12 part-time commissioners to fully understand the complexities of every department in Butte-Silver, particularly in areas as nuanced as fire service operations. Structural reform, both in staffing and governance, is essential if we want to serve our community responsibly and prepare them for the future.
Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, in the next 10 to 20 years, do you think that the urban, for lack of what it's called, the urban fire district boundary will need to be expanded? And then that would mean that we would need more paid, I would assume, or career firefighters and maybe another station?
Madam Chair, Commissioner. Well, absolutely. The growth of Butte has to grow outward. There's really no place inside the old city limits to develop, so it's going to grow out, mostly south and west. I heard Chief Executive J.P. Gallagher say it in front of you guys that Butte is growing, slower than most communities, thankfully, but Butte is growing and it's going to continue to grow, and it only makes sense that as Butte grows, so does our fire services. It needs to grow. Right now, there is an NFPA standard that we have to meet of on-scene times from the time of dispatch, and that's about 6 minutes to a fire call. As the city grows and as our stations get farther and farther away from that call, our NFPA standard is not going to be met, meaning we're too far away from that incident. You take Flint Creek Estates, for example. That is Ramsey Rocker area that is developing, and it is a rural area, but we still respond. We still are expected to respond, and in no way would we make it within 6 minutes. So it would not be unrealistic to imagine a career fire station somewhere close to Montana Connections, where major infrastructure, a lot of hazmat, and bad stuff is out there. Town Pump is proposing a major fuel storage area out there, and even from Station 1 to Montana Connections, it's going to be over 10 minutes. You have Rocker Fire Department there in Rocker, Volunteer Fire Department, but again, they might have a job in Butte. So they're commuting to the station. They got to jump in, go to their vehicles, make their way to the scene. So not unrealistic at all to expect that that's where we should be looking in the future, is growing our service south and west.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in a perfect world, in 10 to 20 years, you mentioned that, volunteers outnumber paid firefighters by more than 3 to 1. What ratio would you like to see down the road, volunteers versus paid, even including like a new fire station out at Montana Connections? What do those numbers look like for you, for a well-staffed, paid, well-staffed volunteer? What do those numbers look like, or have you even thought about it? Thanks.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, in a perfect world, you'd love to recruit and have recruitment and retention for the volunteers. They have 134 right now. They've been in the back of my binder. You'll see some numbers, but their active members. Let's see, their active members in 2021 were 119. Their active members today, it looks like 100 and, no, I'm on the wrong one. Active members in 2021 were 119. Active members today, 134. So you would, if the volunteer fire community, if we get some of the state law and the difficulties figured out in Butte-Silver, in 10 to 20 years, you would love to see that number keep increasing, as it has in the last 4 years. The more volunteer personnel per department means the more options you have to fill that vehicle. And that's what we need, is people to respond and come in that vehicle. Not one person, you need a fully staffed vehicle. A fully staffed paid department, right now with our 2 career departments, we have a daily maximum staffing number of 9 and a minimum of 6. So if you add 2 more departments and you add 2 more or 3 more engine crews, you need, to meet NFPA standards, you need 4 people per vehicle. So that's 12 more personnel per vehicle times 4 shifts. So you're looking at doubling our career manpower if we foresee 2 stations in the next 10 to 20 years, which would be a great goal to strive for. Keep recruitment, keep retention in the volunteer ranks, and keep building our paid department.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, Zach, thank you for being here and giving us all this information. It's a lot to digest, but I keep thinking of that one word, cap. You talked about it throughout your introduction here. And if you've reached a cap now, and we're talking 10 to 20 years, I mean, I do believe we are going to grow, and we will get more tax base. Every house that's built, adds more tax to our coffers. But I think it's just the writing on the wall that we'd have to increase staff. And not just your department, but I think about other departments we've talked to as well. If the town is growing exponentially, everything else has to kind of grow right along with it. But when you said you've reached your cap, it's kind of disturbing. And then you don't have any time to, you're not expression putting out fires, but you know what I mean. Sorry. Yeah, you don't have a chance to do any planning or any kind of just thinking outside of the box and trying to do some projections on what you can and can't do. So I'll let you talk all about that. Thanks.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, thanks for saying that. And yeah, you're correct. We've reached our cap, and it's very scary. It's scary to know that you don't know if one of your fire engines goes out of service, if you have enough money to fix it to put it back in service. I should note, and this would be pretty interesting for everybody as well, in Butte-Silver in the county, we are supported by a special tax district, but within that is 2 taxes, and that's a emergency service tax and a fire tax. Okay, the emergency service tax encompasses all of Butte-Silver County. Everybody pays the emergency service tax, and it is not as big as the fire tax. The fire tax is different. There's people in Flint Creek Estates, all of Montana Connections, most of Rocker, all of Ramsey, a lot of residents in South Butte, a lot of residents up above the Moulton. They do not pay fire tax. They only pay emergency service tax, which means they are only paying for our rescues to respond. They are not paying into the fire tax, which supports the bigger of our tax to assist our fire fund. So does that mean we don't respond to the people who don't pay? No. We respond to every single person in Butte-Silver. So to kind of answer your question is, it's not like we have not done anything. We identified a little bit of the problem years ago, but it has just taken us up until now. We are going through the process of trying to absorb Montana Connections to have them start paying a fire tax. Lots of fire danger, hazmat danger out in Montana Connections, and they are, every time our fire marshal is out there checking a sprinkling system or a fire alarm panel or doing building plans to new construction, or our fire members are out there doing fire extinguisher training, it's basically for free. They do not pay fire tax. So we are going through the process of trying to absorb them into the fire tax, which is extending one of our districts to get out there. So that'll be a significant win, but it's not like it's a fix-all solution, because like I said, there's multiple residents that are spread out across our county that are essentially getting free service. But we will still respond. We'll still go as fast as we can and do the best that we can for that residence, but a lot of them do not pay.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zach, is the fire tax, or is it the homes or buildings inside the boundaries that are described by your ordinance, that boundary of what is considered the urban fire area?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, that is what everybody thought until about 6 months ago, including me. I thought it was the old city limits is who was basically getting fire taxed and everybody outside was not. It's got some areas that at some point got absorbed into the fire tax, but then stopped. If you and I were neighbors, I might pay it, but our property boundary, our fence, you might not pay it, but I pay it. But to answer your question, it's you would think that it would be, but it is not. It's some areas have extended out towards Terra Verde, some areas have gone, into Rocker a little bit, but then just ended.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is very interesting. I did not realize that the Montana Connections Park doesn't pay a fire tax. I'm just amazed that all of the planning that went into the Connections Park, and that's kind of a tangent, so I'll keep that to myself. But for all intents and purposes, is there some information you can give to the commission here with regard to, is this something we can help with charter-wise? I'm just kind of thinking out loud with regard to all the folks that aren't paying, but like you said, if an alarm goes off, you're going to respond to that. And I think folks listening tonight will say, wait a second, that's not fair. Why do I get to pay and my neighbor doesn't have to pay just because of some arbitrary something that happened beforehand? So could we get some information with regard to the fire tax, who pays, who doesn't, and is it something that we should look at even charter? I don't even know if that's too specific because I know we want to keep it general with the charter. But if there's some recommendation we can make with regard to making it fair for those who live in this county, I think I'd really appreciate that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner. Yep, so a little bit more information before I answer your question. Montana Connections does not pay fire tax. They've never paid fire tax. They always have paid emergency service tax. But when I referenced our fire advisory meetings a couple questions ago that we would spend the couple $1 million worth of TIFID funds, that's where the TIFID funds came from, is Montana Connections. So it's not like they've never paid. They had a contract that lasted a few years that they didn't pay into the fire fund. They paid a TIFID, they paid into a TIFID fund that we used only for equipment. You could not pay manpower, you could not pay anything. So a lot of our equipment that Butte-Silver has, a lot of equipment was purchased through the TIFID fund. So it's not like Montana Connections has been getting off scot-free for years. The last couple of years, yes, they have. But what else was I going to say there? It also, remember that I live in the city, and if a fire happens at my house, you would get 3 fire trucks because there's a hydrant. Right? I pay fire tax, I pay emergency service tax. I don't know where you live, but let's just say that Miss Casey lives up in Flick Creek Estates. There is no hydrants. She does not pay fire tax, but she wouldn't get 3 pieces of apparatus. She would get about 13 pieces of apparatus. So the people who are not paying are getting more of the concentration of our pieces of apparatus because it's a little bit rural. So you would have to send, according to our response plan, you would send our 3 engines, our 3 tenders, possibly some backup mini units. I mean, because of the location. So you're not paying fire tax, but you would get a lot of resources. So to answer your question, Ms. Dolan, I have a meeting next week that it's been delayed, so I'm super excited that it's finally happening. We're meeting with the county attorney, the tax assessor. We're finally getting some people to sit down at the table to kind of start getting this process going for Montana Connections. In that meeting, my hope is to identify by maybe a map or something, a little bit of a better understanding of who is paying and who is not. Because I don't know. I know the areas where it's cut off, but these subdivisions are growing so fast that they're just growing and they're not automatically being absorbed into the fire fund. So I'm gonna do my best with getting you some information.
Any other follow-ups? All right, number 7.
7,11. All right, what is the current rate of annual compensation for the fire department director and members of the department's professional staff, and are these rates of compensation fair?
So the page after, I provided you guys with the Butte-Silver Fire Department, and it has classification, monthly salary, and annual salary. This is 2024. So Director of Fire Services is at the very bottom, stating I make $115,294.44. And do you want me to keep going through all those? Okay. Is that rate of compensation fair? I suppose I make a certain percentage of what the chief executive makes. As far as Butte-Silver, 115,000 is I would say doing pretty dang good. No offense to any teachers, but I have 3 teaching degrees, and I taught for less than a year and never dreamed that I would, make 115,000. But in Butte-Silver, maybe that is fair. On the following pages, I did do a wage comparison of other chiefs and assistant chiefs. You can kind of go through those, and on the 3rd page of that is the median of all other cities in Montana that are just the city chief. The median is 154,720, so I'm about a little less than 39,600 below the state median wage, and our assistant chief is just below that. So I've heard different things that we have a cheaper cost of living and so forth. Cheaper to get into a house, yes. Same amount for a cheeseburger at the Montana Club as other places, and same amount for groceries at Walmart. But I'm all in all, I'm pretty pleased and happy with where we're at. At one time, I should note, all members of the fire department and all members of the police department tried to align. So the director of fire services was right in line with the sheriff. The undersheriff was right in line with the assistant chief. The captains were right in line. The captains of the police department were right in line with the battalion chiefs of the fire department. Somewhere we got way behind. Our assistant chief is about 16,000 less than the undersheriff. Same with our battalion chiefs. So career staff in the operations, we're, as you see by the other sheet, they're right in line with yearly compensation from other departments. As far as 2022 goes, I know a lot of these departments are a lot bigger, a lot more populated, a lot more expensive to live. So sometimes I hate comparisons, but that's the only thing you can kind of go against sometimes. But multiple of these departments that I have here did pass major mill levies in the past couple of years, which bumped them significantly above where Butte-Silver is. But, you know, we always have said and will continue to say that this is a service that we enjoy providing, or we wouldn't do it. So we definitely, you need to make a living, but we don't do it for the money. We do it for the service. So wage is what it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's almost automatic, I'm sorry. So on a previous page, Zach, it said, I'm trying to go back to where it was, when you had your, what is it, like a resume or your explanation of what you do, your
Number one.
responsibilities. That responsibility page showed that in 2020, the fire chief was a range of 86,000 to 96,000, and then it jumped to 115,000 by 2025. So that's like, you know, 20,000 in 5 years. Is that because of the wage study that Butte-Silver did? They upped your salary a bit from 2020 to 2025?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I don't believe the wage study was accepted by the commissioners yet, but I might be mistaken. I did not receive anything from the wage study, so I've gotten increases like every other county employee that has received. So last year 3%, the year before was 4%, and the year before was a 5%. And the year before that, I believe was a 2 or something. So I haven't gotten any other wage increases besides what the county has given their employees with everybody else.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure when that, I mean, we've had a lot of other folks come through and have referenced that with this question about, oh, well, you know, thinking parity and trying to get up to, and I think it was the Babb administration, correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy, that did that study of trying to make sure, and it was for like, I think for especially retention, so they wouldn't go to another county for a similar job just because Butte-Silver wasn't paying enough.
Yep.
Ms. Shaw?
I will make a quick answer to that. It was the Fox Lawson study, and then it was, when it came to renewal time, it was deep sixth. And I do believe that maybe you're thinking about when the police officers did a study over the state, they figured out a matrix and they felt that they needed increases. You might be having that confused with that. Okay, of course.
All right.
No, that's fine.
Any follow-up questions? Okay. Chief Osborne, Director Osborne. See, I knew I was going to get it wrong. I said both, but I covered all the bases. Thank you for your time with us. Is there anything you wanted to add or sum up with?
Madam Chair, no, I hope I didn't talk too much or bore you guys to death. I just want to thank you again for sitting and listening. And like I said earlier, I know that this is a confusing subject, so please reach out if you have any further questions, even if you want me to come back one night. So I'd be happy to. So thank you again.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. All right. All right, folks, thanks for sticking it out. I'm going to try to move us as quickly as we can. So, go ahead. Oh, okay. Perfect. We'll make sure he gets it. Yeah. We'll make sure. All right, so moving on to item 8, correspondence and/or study commission update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No correspondence this week that I'm aware of anyway. And next week we have the volunteer fire departments coming, and then the 2 weeks after that we'll have the commissioners coming. I still have to reach out. The only person we have not spoken with is the acting coroner, and I wanted to get some input as to when you wanted to fit him in, before, during, or after some of those issues. And then I would like to request approval to submit a purchase order for a laptop, and you guys received that estimate from the IT department.
Was there any discussion about the laptop purchase? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious because I was out of the loop last week, and I apologize for that. But are we going in halves with the county for a laptop, or are we expected to pay the whole bill?
I also was absent, so what did we discuss with that regard? We just said we wanted to purchase it, move forward, and then,
Yeah. I'm not sure there is a halves with the county since we are the county. Yeah, I'm not sure if another department would go for, I just don't know. I mean, we're using a laptop now that was purchased by some of the department wholly with their money, so I don't really know. I never got an answer to that question, but I did get an estimate, so.
Ms. Shaw?
Well, judging by our limited funds, $1,100, it's $1,100, I get that. But who maintains the ownership of it after the study commission is over? I mean, it seems like a lot of money to just hand it back to the county.
Yeah,
Maybe they should play a part in it. That's just my thinking. Could we ask and find out?
Mr. Dennehy, you had your microphone on?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the buying of the laptop for.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There's questions about, what happens to it. I think ultimately it's a county resource and it will be utilized, I'm sure, well by whomever in 2 years. So I think we'll be okay. Mr. Steppen.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, we were given a budget authority of a specific amount that included administrative services, and I guess from my perspective that if we were to ask the question if there's money available to help offset this, the answer we might get is the money that's been carved out for us to spend over 2 years. And I just think that it's no small amount, no question about it, but for $1,100, this is the third meeting we've talked about it. I'd be in favor of purchasing a laptop and then figuring out if someone else can offset the cost at a later date.
Ms. McCormick.
When I was a city county employee, my computer died and I had to get a new one, and it had to come out of my department's funds. I think this is just standard procedure, and maybe Lori or Dan knows that as well, but they didn't give it to me when I left.
I think that is standard procedure. You don't get to take it. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that, I know we've been talking about it for several weeks now, but for all intents and purposes, we have a set budget. We have a set amount that's carved out for the study commission over the next 2 years. When a department is out of funds, they can just come to the county commission and ask for, or if they get something and need a match or whatever, and say, I need some more money. And 9 times out of 10, they're given that okay. So I would think that somebody, if IT is ultimately going to get it back, I really think the county should come in half with our budget, because $1,100 is a lot of money, but I just foresee down the road for all these other expenses that we have, and a big expense that we'll likely talk about tonight is the marketing person again. So I just don't want to be stuck at the end or getting close to the election time in '26 and we run out of funds. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'd rather be more cautious right now than sorry later.
Mr. Thielen?
All this penny pinching's nonsense. She needs a computer. We've already made a motion, seconded it. I think we should vote on it.
All right, we'll call for the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? So we have 1 nay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
I will proceed.
anything else, Kim, in that section?
No.
Okay, so moving on to number 9, unfinished business, our public outreach discussion. Op-ed pieces is still on here. We've got those moving, correct? And they're good to go?
Correct. I've got a framework for 2 options for what the next op-eds in the coming weeks might look like that I'll share with the group prior to next week's meeting, and we can pick a path.
Thank you. All right, and moving on to our marketing and advertising contract, I did ask Kim to please photocopy this for you so that it was at your desk. And Ms. Adams is here tonight, so she can answer any questions that we might have as well. But specifically in the scope of work, she and Matt and I visited about Section 1, that project management and board coordination, that really that is our ex officio's role. But there are some things that she would schedule and organize and help us with, such as reaching out to the service clubs and perhaps working with other outreach events that we might have. And then she would continue to serve as a coordinator for us in terms of doing that public outreach above and beyond what Kim already does for us. So, for example, when, again, I'm bringing up the Kiwanis Club outreach or planning for those public listening sessions, et cetera. And then we moved some of that budget that she had originally in Section 1. We reduced that to $1,500 and moved some of those expenses into the survey, community survey and data collection, just thinking that perhaps there was going to be a little bit more money needed there, especially as we try to inspire people to respond to the survey. Maybe we'd have some incentives, et cetera. And there's a little bit more, we talked about making sure that we had enough person power to get people to, stop and grab with a survey, such, like maybe at the folk festival or something like that. So I entertain any questions that you might have, and I'll have Ms. Adams come up to answer some of those questions if there's things that we want to think through. Ms. McCormick.
So has this gone to the council secretary yet?
She has it. She's holding it, waiting for our approval, and then she would move it through council. It would be on their agenda. We do have some question about if we have to move it through council because we believe we have budgetary authority. We were trying to get an opinion from the county attorney on that. Ms. Casey, do you want to add to that?
If you look at section 73183, I think it was, and that's the powers of the study commission. In there, it does say that we may enter into contracts and with consultants. So I believe that we probably have the authority to enter into the contract ourselves.
Well, that is whatever. I'd like to have the opinion of the county attorney on that just to make sure, but I would like, whether it goes, I would like it just change in wording in project management and board coordination. That first statement, it should serve as the primary public outreach and engagement coordinator for the study commission. And so adding that public engagement coordinator for the study commission, eliminating all volunteer. We're not an all volunteer study commission. We have a paid ex officio member. And then it's just understood that the other items, especially the last 2, are just as part of her duties as the coordinator for public outreach and engagement. And then another question that I had was under item 4. The last one, email campaign. I was a little distressed that it was just limited to 2, what I see as business organizations, that we're going to send to their members monthly update surveys and invitations to events. It seems like we should be able to expand that and have more groups included in those email lists that are not just business organizations. I mean, there's just all kinds of things out there that I think we could do, and I could provide some email lists if that's possible, but I just would like to see a much broader scope than just business.
Ms. McCormick, do you have some suggestions for editing that language that might be comprehensive enough to get to your intention, but without having to try to brainstorm every
I'd say
group?
use ready available community email lists and not and not just limit it to, that broadens the path, and maybe we can all work together to help Shanna come up with some more ideas. I'm certainly not opposed to sending it to the BLDC and the chamber, but when I look at that, it seems like we're limiting ourselves to businesses and business concerns, and I want the public to know we're going to make a.
Okay. I think that's fair, and there's a lot of lists that we probably just didn't think through yet. So is there any objection to editing that to email campaigns use readily available community email lists to send monthly updates? Shanna, does that fit for you?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, those were just examples. It wasn't the intent to limit that scope. I expect that scope to be much broader. And in fact, in terms of emails, I envision multiple ways of allowing people to sign up to get updates. So I see that as, those were just a couple examples.
Ms. McCormick?
Yeah, I think that's great, and that's, I think you could do so many things to, advertise on Facebook, sign up. But I still would like the wording changed in here, because this, whether it's a contract that goes to the council or not, it's still a public it's available for the public to view, and I want the public to know. Because when I read that, that's how it sounds to me. So if we can just make it more broad wording.
Yep, no, I appreciate that, no problem.
Ms. Casey?
Madam Chair, I would suggest that we just leave it as email campaign, because if you're going to allow private people to sign up too, let's just leave it open and just put it as email campaign.
Okay, Ms. Dolan?
Just a quick question. Thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. With the scope of work, I just have like a real broad question that if we sign the contract with you and then begin the listening sessions where we start getting public input, and someone in the crowd has this awesome idea that we have not even thought about of outreach and to get more input from the community, would we be in a position of, hey, let's add that to your scope of work, but if we've already signed the contract, would that be considered in your mind to be a change order, and then additional money would be needed?
No, so I expect that to happen. I encourage that to happen. I hope ideas come from the council. I'm sure ideas will come from the public. It's hard in a scope of work to really cover every scenario. So the only time I would see, I see this contract as doing a robust public education and outreach campaign, and for that to be successful. So yeah, I absolutely see other ideas coming forward. The only time I would anticipate maybe a major kind of a change order or an amendment to the contract would be something that had major expense attached to it that none of us foresaw at this time. Madam Chairman, it kind of alluded to some ideas that we've talked about incentives to get people to come to public meetings, to get people to share their ideas. We've talked about those types of things are anticipated and would be included in the contract already. So I hope that answers your question.
Ms. Shaw?
Age before beauty, Ben, same. Try to figure that one out. Hi, Shannon. Thank you so much for this. And I have a question from way back when I first saw this. But you mentioned that BLD possibly, I think it's worded, they will assist as needed, as a support. And then I was wondering, part of that question is the 30 grand, that's the complete proposal. Is BLDC in the chamber, are they participating included in the total cost, like a subcontracting thing that you would do on your own within this structure, or how would that work?
So I have had a couple of conversations, sit-down conversations with the executive director of the BLDC, Kelly Sullivan. She felt like they weren't in a position that they wanted to take this on themselves, but offered their support to me and to the commission. We have not talked in a lot of detail about exactly what that would look like. She has offered just some staff support, help with the survey, help with outreach, those types of things. Those would be included in this contract. Again, if there was anything, I think, really extraordinary or that we're not foreseeing right now, we'd have to talk about that. But everything that we've talked about so far, like I said, some staff support, some help with the survey, help with public outreach, let's see, some coordination with the media is another thing that we've talked about. That would be included in the contract.
Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, hey, I just kind of wanted to go back to that 73183. Dan, did you look at that, number 2? It says a study commission may contract and cooperate with other agencies, public or private, that it considers necessary for assistance in carrying out the purpose for which the commission was established. So I think Mr. Enruth is actually going to agree with this contract and give us his blessing.
Ms. Casey?
And Madam Chair, just update the commission. I did email Mr. Enruth. I just haven't heard back.
Madam Chair, and to answer Ben's question directed to me, I believe we have the authority to enter into a contract and not go to the Council of Commissioners. This is part of our duties as we hire consultants throughout the process. Probably the reason why, because it's quicker than other processes, but we could always put this on file at the council office and make sure people are aware of it for public input. But I read it as Lori does, that we have that authority. So, but I'm not a lawyer, so.
And I think where it got a little muddy was in our process to get in the boilerplate language of the professional services agreement. We requested that out of Karen Hassler's office, and another person came back, and then it kind of went through the normal process that is required of county contracts. And so I think you're right, Ms. Casey, and we will, of course, pause until we have an opinion from our county attorney. But I'm comfortable asking for a vote to approve this contract, given the edits that we have, and if there's any further discussion before we move to that voting. But I know we had an edit in first one, serve as the primary public outreach and engagement coordinator for the study commission. So that would be an edit we would need to make. And then the other edit that was recommended was under section 4, email campaign. So we would just leave it general. We'd say email campaign to send monthly update surveys and invitations to events. So rather than being specific with whom we're sending it to.
Madam Chair, I would move with those edits to move the contract forward and to approve the contract as it is designed.
Ms. Shaw?
On the question, thank you, Shanna. So I didn't read this whole thing, I'm sorry, we just got it tonight. But is there something in here where you do an update, or we have a, where you come before us maybe once a month or something and just give us kind of a picture of what you've been doing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do plan to be at every one of these Monday night meetings, and I'd be happy to give an update bi-weekly or monthly, depending on the activities, whatever we feel is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Steppen?
Second to the motion.
Thank you.
And would point out that it lists monthly status reports to the commission in the proposal.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, so discussion on the question. Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this might be a question for Cindy. instead of you, Shannon. Just on the very first page, and number 2 states, effective date, obviously when it's signed, and will terminate on the 31st day of December 2026. I just, knowing that that's a hard deadline, and that's a hard date for the finish of this, I just wanted to make sure that nothing spills over into 27. Did you have any spillover or anything with regard to finishing up things after the November election of 26? Just in case, just to make sure that we're covering all the bases.
You really think I can remember 20 years ago? Sorry.
Come on, Cindy, you can do it.
I'm just kidding. And I will say that back 20 years ago, we did do our own assignment of a contractor for advertising and marketing, and I don't remember it going through council, but we obviously had to have a service agreement. And to answer your question, after the election, it was considered the end. The only thing that proceeded after that was you had up to a year to list your other suggestions and recommendations that are not voted on. They're just recommendations to community, but it ended on the 9th of, I think it was the 7th of November. I remember the date. So.
All right, so we have the motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor to approve?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. With the amendments, thank you. And Ms. Adams, thank you so much. And if we can perhaps make those edits, and then we'll get it sent to County Attorney's Office.
Yep, thank you.
And on that issue, Ms. Adams also provided us a draft kind of schedule. It was calendared out, and so I ask all of you to please look that over before next meeting. And then I know we had a conversation, or there was a request for us to come before the Sunshine Kiwanis Club, and so there were some of you that said that you'd be willing to do that. And so I guess we just need to kind of, probably we can do that via email or talk about who might go to that Sunshine Kiwanis Club and what day we would go for that. But that is one of the things that's on that calendar as well. And then Party Line is the next public outreach, and God help me, I can't remember which Wednesday it is now, Kim. June 18th, okay. And that's the 3 folks, correct? Okay. Yep. Okay, perfect. So June 18th. Ms. Casey?
Madam Chair, did we receive the calendar by Ms. Adams through email?
I believe so. I believe it's an attachment, and if not, I will forward it really quick too.
Okay.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll do that when we're done with the meeting, okay? All right. Any other discussion on public outreach? Okay, so moving on to commissioner visits. The questions, thank you, subcommittee, for finishing that draft of the commissioner questions. They have been forwarded to Barb Davies and to the chair and vice chair. And then I just asked for them to try to organize themselves in terms of 6 commissioners coming each night instead of, swamping us all in one night. And so hopefully we will hear back from them soon in terms of who's coming, and I will make sure to reach out again. But we're clicking right along. And then any other questions about that, or? Okay. And then with our volunteer fire department visit, Tui Mattern has responded back to me that it's going to be himself, Jason Willoughby, and Ed Fisher, who will be here next week. And then they were also looking for some questions to guide the discussion. And so we had a little bit of conversation on with the subcommittee regarding what those questions were. And so do we have them finalized?
I apologize. They do not. If we could just spend 2 minutes after the meeting, and so I can have some guidance, I will get them to you first thing in the morning.
Excellent. And then I'll get those forwarded to TUI. And then they did tell me that they wanted to make sure that they gave their opinion in terms of they think structures that might help the volunteer fire department and the relationship with the career, which fits within that scope of charter. I was very specific with TUI in my conversation that it needed to be direct and problem solving, and not necessarily an airing of grievances unless we need to hear something that's particularly troublesome. But again, like tonight, I'd like to keep us focused on the issue at hand and what we can do with our structure and function. Any other questions about volunteer fire? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I just have a question about why the questions would be different based on the questions we asked the paid fire. Why would the questions be different? That just invites more contention, or, you know, if they find out afterwards, well, they didn't have that question, why did we have that question? So I'd rather be proactive and make sure everyone's on a fair, level playing field.
I think we're looking at just moving to 3 questions because obviously they wouldn't have a salary or annual compensation question like we do. That would be one that would be taken. And then their specific responsibilities and duties. I think we can say what are the duties or responsibilities, or how do the volunteer fire department fit into, you know, the overall fire services with Butte-Silver Bow. And then, you know, certainly number 2 and 3 are you know, perfectly fine. They would be the same question. Yeah.
So my concern again is just trying to make sure everybody's on the same page. And even if it's not applicable, to have them say, I'm sorry, number 6 is not applicable, just to keep all those questions the same, because I don't want someone to come up and say, why did you change our questions when the fire department had their questions? I'd just rather have them, we go like we've always been doing with everybody, and if it's not applicable, it's not applicable, and then that way we can say we're fair with everybody. I'm trying to be, you know,
I understand where you're coming from. We did change our questions to commissioners, though. We shortened the commissioners' questions, too. So would you be suggesting that we should revise those?
No, I'm just thinking fairness with fire and fire, as opposed to, yeah, fire and commission's totally different. And if we can, you know, abbreviate the commission one with 12, that's perfectly fine. But I'm just thinking fairness with regard to both fire entities.
Mr. Steppen?
I agree with Commissioner Dolan. I think that we've set a kind of a standard of questions with minimal revisions based on the department, and I would encourage us to do the same and invite them to bring their, in the same manner that the Director of Fire Services did, and have the opportunity to expand outside of our questions. They're certainly encouraged to do that, but I think that it's important for us to, we've done a pretty good job of not catering the questions to the department, and I think it's important that we continue to do that while inviting, you know, helpful follow-up questions and the opportunity for them to give their opinions as well.
Ms. McCormick?
Well, I'm very happy to do that. I needed to input. We've had some different suggestions for questions, but I still think we should just eliminate the last question because they're volunteers. So I don't think we should go through that, but I'm very happy to just stick with the top 6 questions.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have to say, after hearing Matt too, that's, there's no point in asking for trouble, but, you know, I think that the commissioners are a whole different animal. They're all elected. They don't have a director, so to speak. It's they're very focused on one part of the legislative branch, which is a whole different animal. And I think that that's an exception that they won't mind. So thanks.
All right, excellent. Good discussion. I appreciate that. And I will preface that meeting with the same as I did tonight's meeting, with structure, function, charter, and trying to keep us, you know, on time. Any other discussion about volunteer fire department visits? All right. How about charter review with county attorney? Oh, he's not here, so we were going to skip that part. I do believe that he asked specifically for us to write questions or propose language that he could be more directed in his response instead of go line by line of the charter. So if we can please be mindful of that and do our due diligence to get things to county attorney and Ruth. All right, new business. I do this all the time. So new business, our service organizations, the Kiwanis Exchange Club, Elks, et cetera. Let's organize ourselves via who's willing and able and has time to go. And then we'll be in touch with Ms. Adams to schedule us. And is there anybody that right off the bat is just eager? Dan is. All right.
I'll do whatever you want, Prayer.
Mr. Steppen.
Miss, well, I'm assuming that we want to keep it to 3 or less of each of those visits? Is that, so we don't get into being an official public meeting and all those things?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and any other conversation on news business, Ms. Shaw?
Did you want to just, I mean, I think Lori and I said the 23rd and, oh, the 18th, excuse me. And then if you want to just, that's coming up pretty soon. So if there's a third one, like to join us.
I'll join the.
Oh, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan.
That's absolutely correct.
Oh, I'm.
You know, rose between two thorns. That's perfect.
I appreciate that. So we'll have Ms. Shaw, Ms. Casey, and Mr. Dennehy on the 18th of June with Sunshine Kiwanis at, is it 7 a.m.? Okay, excellent. Very good. Thank you.
Can I re-add? No, that's fine.
Excellent. Okay, and then we'll be in touch on the other organizations as Ms. Adams gets those organized. Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. Kim, could I ask you to look at your minutes? I know we had several conversations of looking at the charter. There were some really good suggestions. If we could just maybe have a list of those questions that were brought up at our meetings, and there, I can't remember the dates or times, but some of us, I know that Cindy did, and a number of us did, look at particular questions on the charter. If we could have that kind of a cheat sheet and have us review that and then send maybe a conversation or a communication email to the county attorneys, that'd be great if you could do that for us.
So like just the general, like this is what we're considering?
Yeah, we had conversations in our meetings that you probably put down on your minutes. If
Okay.
we can maybe find those, we can review those and have send in an email of those particular questions we had regarding the charter. And then Matt could have the opportunity to look at them probably now rather than later. And if those change, then we can respond again. But if that wouldn't be too much trouble, that would be great. Thank you.
Excellent suggestion. I think we kind of said that at the Emergency Services Center. We were thinking we needed a running list, so I appreciate that because I was losing track of which ones we've gone through.
Madam Chair, I've actually been making kind of a running list. But it's probably been like 6 weeks since I've looked at it, but I did start one in the other notebook.
Excellent. All right, we don't have a public hearing tonight. Any other scheduled matters? Okay, and we will be back next Monday at 5, and then it'll be soon that we will start looking at changing of our every Monday to maybe every other Monday, I hope, someday soon. We'll be doing that. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay. Anybody opposed? All right. Thank you.